You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look at better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheap again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 11th part of What If Deku Helps His Best Friend, Peter Parker. Smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. He was the hero that smiled. That's what they'd called him in the years before he became known throughout the world as the symbol of peace. Because a smile brought hope in this world. Those who smiled in the face of adversity were the ones who were the strongest. Nana had told him that, and he lived by those words. But he knew that sometimes, even he could lose the smile. That even he had his limits. And when he reached those limits, he was dangerous. So it was, when he saw his two students making their way to the arena. He knew something was wrong. To others they would perhaps see little more than steely determination. Perhaps the drive to win. That wasn't what he saw. Bakugo had drive. Bakugo wanted to win. Parker wanted something else. Stop the match. His words were quiet. Almost quiet enough that he hadn't even realized he'd spoken aloud until Snipe turned his head, looking at him. What was that? Yagi remained still in his seat, staring at the camera feed with a close-up to the arena. Stop the match, he repeated. Snipe looked towards Vlad, both teachers looking at each other as though Yagi had lost his mind. Any particular reason? This won't end well, he answered, with a calm he didn't wholly feel. Give whatever reason you have to, just call the match. You know we can't do that. He was right. They couldn't. Not yet. The opening bell sounded, and the two fighters charged. Katsuki with his turbo speed firing a massive blast behind him, and Parker kicking up dust and debris from his low leap forward. Their eyes were locked, and Katsuki reared back his right hand, as did Parker. Just need to get in a good lick up close, beat Parker at his own game and send him flying. That'll teach him. Die. Katsuki roared, seeing Parker's follow-through, and on instinct, tilted his head to the side as he thrust his right hand towards Parker's face. Parker's fist flew through where his head had been located only a moment before. Katsuki's palm snaked past Parker's head as an explosion rocked behind him while a small jet stream surged past the blonde's hair. This power, it's just like, he remembered, back at the battle trial. It wasn't as powerful as Deku's arm-shattering uppercut. But it was dangerous nonetheless. It was then that Bakugo remembered Birdbrain's words back at that battle trial. First strike wins. For Parker, that is. His own blast roared past the American, whose stone face flinched as the underside of his right arm got singed and burnt. Okay, Scratch going in close for an explosion. Too risky. Katsuki backed off, right in time as he used turbo to retreat and successfully avoided a left hook, using his blasts to stun Parker's head as he ducked under the strike. His left arm lashed out like a snake and he blasted forward, catching the American as he was rearing a leg back to kick. He saw Parker yell out before landing, getting back up near instantaneously with an animalistic growl, and charging forth towards the retreating Katsuki. The blonde roared as he activated his quirk again to continue creating space, the brown-haired boy relentless as he yelled through the explosion. He landed low, hands raised as the smoke cleared, finally creating some room. Parker stood there, singed and bruised, but his teeth bared in discomfort as he breathed, staggering lightly as his cold glare became hot. With a yell like an animal, he charged forward with a leap. Here he comes. Parker came down with a spinning punch to the ground that Katsuki sidestepped while raising both hands. The punch cracked the cement beneath their feet, cratering it while also causing dust and debris to erupt into the air like a missile had landed instead of a fist. With a yell, the blonde fired, but Parker sidestepped the explosion and came in on a back-foot leap. Back turned as he lunged with a backhand of an iron pipe, with cement attached like some kind of axe. Give me some damn room. The blonde bomber ducked, feeling Parker's pipe catch his hair as Katsuki came in with a blast from his left. He needed to create space. He was barely dodging by the skin of his teeth. He caught Parker dead in the chest and blasted him, landing 20 meters away due to the detonation. With an angry grunt, he got back up, seeing Parker who stumbled several meters, his shirt burnt. He twirled back to his feet, hand to the ground and pipe behind him with his free hand the moment Katsuki got to his feet. Hands raised. Parker was seething, nostrils flaring. Katsuki finally exhaled, and the crowd roared due to the 8-second display of opening combat. Good, that had to hurt, he thought to himself. Parker took off with a yell, dust flying behind him as Katsuki gritted his teeth and brought his hands together before he fired. Stun grenade. The bright flash was right in Parker's path and Katsuki went low, avoiding a diving slash. Idiot. Katsuki, with his back to the ground, raised his hands and aimed. Parker was right overhead even if he was close to the ground. One full gauntlet level blast, and he could wring him out. He roared, firing, and was promptly blasted backwards along the concrete, using smaller explosions to bring him to his feet. The adrenaline did its job in blocking out the pain in his forearms. Parker had been caught. So Katsuki saw him land where he once was and gasped, seeing a distorted and superheated iron pipe land out of bounds. He had used it to propel himself over his explosion. Parker rose up, shirt and pants in tatters, skin singed and peeling. Parker roared like a berserker and reared back his fist, charging once more. The blonde felt his heart skip a beat and instinct willed him to dodge, his body going sideways and avoiding the giant cratering punch that impacted the arena as if a grenade had detonated there. The explosion user landed a good deal away near the arena's edge. On instinct, Katsuki took to the skies with his explosions, and he avoided something thrown. After flying 30 meters into the air, his head turned to glance behind him and he saw the thrown metal pipe crumpled against a stone wall. He turned back towards Parker, who stood in the arena, gazing up at him with a glare, panting as his arms returned back to a neutral position from his throwing motion. What an incredible half a minute of opening action. Bakugo has taken to the skies. Looks like Parker is without those web shooters from the previous round. What will he do now, folks? He isn't looking so hot right now. Katsuki finally let out a breath of relief. Now, I need to do my best to dodge if I ever get close, but for now I need to rely on my explosions. Getting in close is a death sentence, Katsuki thought as he glared down at Parker, who leapt backwards, backflipping and landing near the crater he had created with the previous punch. I need to use the arena, get into a favorable spot, then blast him with everything I've got. He may be tough, but Katsuki grinned. I can go plus ultra. He won't be able to survive a gauntlet level blast. I will be greater than all might. You're strong, Parker. Stronger than anyone in my class, but my will to win is better than yours. Can't reach me without your toys, huh? He goaded. Those blasts had to hurt too. Parker remained stoic, before a small smirk formed on his features through his pain breathing. He began to brush off his shoulder to get some scraps of clothing and debris off. Once, twice, oh you fucker, Katsuki hissed mentally as he bared his teeth, explosions popping as he narrowed his eyes. Parker thought he could mock his amazing quirk and be able to walk for a week. Fuck no. No, he's taunting me. I just need to hold up here, wait for him to lose patience. He's been yelling like an animal here. Without those web line launchers of his, he can't get me unless he jumps. And with my view of the arena, he thought, seeing how Peter was on one side of the arena and him on the other, all I have to do is pull off a quick dodge and fire another gauntlet level blast towards the wall, and I win. Parker continued to stare at him, eyes set as he continued to breathe hard, and Katsuki couldn't help but smirk lightly. Seems like the fight with Vinagirl may be starting to take its toll. He saw his eyes move around, and he remembered the previous match as he saw Parker eye one of the remaining braziers that he didn't destroy earlier. Then he sprinted towards it. I don't think so. Katsuki flew off in pursuit. All he had to do was keep a healthy distance and try to fire a full power blast, and prevent him from having a giant flaming bowl to throw. Except Parker stopped in his sprint towards the brazier, backflipping towards one of the craters he'd made in the arena as Katsuki averted his flight path towards the brazier. He saw his opponent get low, hand go under the crater, and with a roar, lifted up a giant concrete tile with his forward scooping motion. Grabbing onto it, he twirled it and threw the SUV-sized chunk right at him. All he had to do was dodge to the side, avoid the projectile, and the sound of cracking rock filled the air. By instinct alone, Katsuki yelled as he brought his hands to the side and fired an explosive blast to veer out of the way as he twirled in the air, avoiding the first giant jagged rock piece. And he saw Parker kicking other smalling chunks his way like a football forward practicing shots on goal. Right his way as the rocks were destroyed upon contact, and sprays of debris surged out. He felt many a pebble surge past him, destroyed rock chunks flying out like buckshot. He felt his ear get nicked, and Katsuki felt a clang on one of the soles of his iron-toed boots. If he hadn't dodged, "You're mine," he yelled, shaking the morbid thought, flying fast and around as he did his best to circle his opponent. Parker kept an eye on him as he brought up another chunk of concrete like a hacky sack and kicked, buckshot spraying out as Katsuki aimed upward, avoiding the giant chunk and some debris. Full power blast to get a ring out. That was his only option now, although a stun grenade to surprise him may be his opening. Twirling in the air after dodging another chunk of cement tossed from Parker like a shot put, the blonde brought his hands together. Stun grenade. he flashed, bathing the arena in light as he surged forward a little, throwing both hands into turbo. Katsuki then twirled his body into a corkscrew as he began to use his explosions to propel his movement. Faster, stronger, his arms began to mildly ache, but he didn't care. Time to end this. HOWIZTER. The world was like a blur as fire and fury laced around Katsuki. I am PIACT. With a roar, he landed again as fire and brimstone lanced out onto Parker's position. The blast as large as a house. Katsuki gritted his bared teeth, yet his smile never left him. Even through all the pain in his forearms and his bleeding ear, he saw movement in the smoke, and close to. That explosion hadn't finished him off. Fine, time to go plus ultra. Again, he fired. A house-sized explosion departing from his arms as he felt wind and heat wash over him by the time he landed on the ground. Again, Katsuki fired once more, the fire and fury surging forward. He finally exhaled, falling to his knees and panting as he winced. God, it fucking hurt. But this was the pinnacle, the final battle. As the old saying goes, no pain, no gain. Smoke covered the other side of the stone arena, and Katsuki could make out that Cementos was on the edge of his seat. No need to worry, this fight was off. Movement in the smoke. Parker emerged, without his shirt, pants in tatters as he waved his arms sideways and hard. The black smoke cloud parted like the Red Sea as the blonde felt his stomach fall out under him and his red eyes widened. Parker was panting, bare chest heaving, arms peeling, as was his face. But that glare was still there. But how? He'd been so close to the arena's edge. He should be out of. Beside Parker's position was raised cement, stone, and a large depression in the floor. That sound from before. He'd punched the arena to make a foxhole, and made an arena tile lift up to make a makeshift shield. Parker let out an exhale, and in Katsuki's world, that step of his foot sounded like a thunderclap as he took a step forward. Body coiled as if ready to charge right at him. His muscles tensed for one giant leap, right at him. Katsuki roared at the top of his lungs, eyes wide with fear and desperation as he fired again, conjuring an even larger explosion, one larger than the one he'd used on the other American girl when he was down on the ground, far larger as fire and wind gusted forth. He panted, arms screaming. Die, he yelled, more fire and fury lacing out as his arms screamed. Die, another and another. PLUUUUS, another explosion. ULLTRRRAAA. Fall Parker, fall damn you. DAMNIT, God fucking. And again, DAMNIIIT. More explosions surged out, and the entire side of the arena that Parker was on was covered in smoke and debris. Katsuki coughed, seething as he got back to his feet. No foxhole would have been able to handle that barrage, and at that distance, even if grabbing on for dear life and suffering through the burns and heat, any man would have been sent flying. He has to be out of the ring by now. He panted as he walked forward. His chest heaved, his adrenaline trying its utmost to stifle the pain even as it almost consumed his senses. Yet it didn't compare to the rampant jubilee as Katsuki rose up to his full height amongst the dust and smoke. There, I'm the one. Who is the one closest to All Might? He exclaimed, smiling bright and proudly. Not you. You lost before. Back then when you got yourself caught. You brought trouble for everyone back then. Deku fucked up his body. Yaoyorozu got blood on her hands. Red Hair became a fucking wimp. But me, I've only lost by some stupid rules back against Deku in that stupid battle. People got in my damn way during the race and you all ganged up on me during the war. Katsuki raved, furious as he grinned like the devil. But now, everyone knows that I will be the greatest, the strongest. I'm going to be the ace here, not you. He turned to his right, towards where Cementos was sitting on the edge of his throne. Teach, call it, yet his eyes were. He caught movement in his peripheral vision. Bakugo felt his heart stutter in his chest as he snapped his head to the side, lightning quick only for an upwards sledgehammer to land solidly in his midsection, directly under the ribs. His air exploded from his lungs. He could taste copper at the back of his throat as his whole body was lifted off the ground. Pain exploded across his body as sparks flew from his hands in reflexive bursts. Parker was there, leg extended in the form of a kick as he caught Katsuki straight in the gut, eyes wide and filled with a pure unbridled hate. Teeth bared in a silent snarl. He could feel the vertigo, the inertia, the force of the kick, and Bakugo struggled to keep his head on straight, struggled to figure out how to halt his body's momentum with blasts before he fell out of bounds. But before he'd even started to think on how to do that, Parker's hand snaked out, in a blur of motion too fast for him to fully see. He only felt the brutal, bone-crushing grip on his wrist and the red-hot pain of something snapping. All his momentum ceased in an instant, and the full weight of his body was jerked forward with a grinding crunch of a dislocated shoulder, all while he still didn't have the air to scream in pain from the initial kick. His vision swam and lurched as Parker tossed him towards the center of the arena, broken wrist and injured arm scraping along the ground, sending barbed wire between the sinews of muscle there as Katsuki howled and yelled in agony. But still, he could think, even now piecing it together, replaying the fight in his mind and determining where it went wrong. He'd blinded himself. His blasts were so large that he couldn't see, so Parker just jumped over the blasts, high enough and at the right angle and speed to avoid the shockwaves, so high and so strong that his explosions didn't even faze him. Just like Deku against Icy Hot. The whole time he could have moved like this, done this, he'd been playing him. From the opening bell, I never stood a chance. No. He grit his teeth, forcing himself onto his knees through the mind-flaying pain that lit his whole side on fire. He could sense Parker's footsteps as he looked up, blood dripping from his mouth. Real heroes don't lose, he wheezed. In an instant, he saw Parker's face twist, a rictus of pure, absolute fury, teeth bared, before he let out a bestial avenging roar, his blazing eyes covered by his brown locks. Then, he shot forward like a bullet as he shattered the concrete under the force of his foot, leaving dust and debris in his wake. And then all Katsuki saw was yellow a second before he heard a sound like two cars crashing together. Wind rushed over him in the now silent arena as all the dust and debris moved thanks to the speed and power of the two figures before him. Haha, I understand that you want to go plus ultra and win young Parker, but I believe young Bakugo is too injured to continue. What? Katsuki felt his eyes widen, red irises trailing upwards to see the unmistakable form of All Might in his yellow pinstripe suit standing directly in front of him. Right in front of a rabid and seething Parker. The symbol of peace turned his head to smile kindly over his shoulder. It's alright now, young Bakugo. You did your best. He felt sick. His stomach heaved and he felt the strength literally drain from his body. He hadn't lost. He'd needed to be rescued. Just like, back then, at the creek with fucking Deku so many years ago. He'd needed to be rescued. Again, it was a delicate balance he was attempting to strike here, Toshinori knew. The world could not know of this. They could not realize how close this had come to tragedy as he saw it play out in his mind's eye on what would have occurred if he was a second too late. Parker would have been ruined, as would UA, and all involved would remember this day with great regret and sadness. The USJ was bad enough. A student maimed on national TV would have destroyed this institution. He did not know how the situation had deteriorated so much between these two so quickly. That was his failing and he would accept responsibility for that. But he could see it in Parker's eyes, in his face as the blinding fury left him and he fully realized the implications of what he'd almost done. The rage left him as he looked hollow, deflating like a balloon. The blow was strong enough that even he felt it when he caught it. Even if it wouldn't have killed Bakugo, it would have injured him severely. Permanently maybe. Toshinori looked down at Parker, brown eyes meeting dark blue. He held the boy's clenched fist firmly, but as gently as he could, still smiling towards him. Not for the crowd, not for the cameras around them. He smiled directly at the boy, with something that was pleading, understanding, and warning all at once. He felt and saw as the fight drained out of the prospective hero. Midnight smiled as she raised her flag, calling the victor. Though the tension in her body and how Cementos eased himself slowly back into his chair from his half-raised position told him they both recognized the strength behind that blow, and how they'd both nearly fallen asleep on it. Bakugo is unable to continue. The winner is Parker, Midnight stammered out. He heard the crowd roar in approval, oblivious to all that had just transpired as Present Mike began to hype up how Peter Parker was now the champion of the first-year group of the UA Sports Festival. All Might's hand landed on the American's shoulder, turning him towards Cementos and Midnight where the victory podium was rising under the stadium. He would need to talk to him after the ceremony, catch him in the locker room. Come on young Parker, let's get ready for the ceremony. You'll need to check in with Recovery Girl. What with those burns and all Might said, smile still on his face. But his heart felt disturbed as he looked back. Bakugo was on the stretcher, an arm over his face as his chest wheezed. All Might could make out the tears coming down from his eyes, a hand stifling the screams and yells of agony and despair. Recovery Girl was at the mouth of the tunnel, ready to smooch him to start his recovery. Sure, Parker replied, his tone hollow as they walked together towards the diminutive nurse, the chance of All Might. And Parker, continuing to fill the air. Holy shit. There were no two words that better described what went on down there. Shout his jaw unhinged as he couldn't so much as offer one bit of commentary. What could have happened down there? Mike was pulling a speech out of his ass for how good the match was, and thankfully, the crowd was eating it up like they always did. Shouta couldn't see everything from within the commentator's booth, but he could see enough. He saw Bakugo, one of the strongest students in his class, be defeated by an opponent that in one match solidified his so-called nickname as the next All Might. The motions were acrobatic, the blows flashy for the camera. But those were the ones that didn't matter. The ones that did. Shouta knew that Peter was strong, there was no denying that. His ball pitch spoke for itself, as did his other showings during the physical examination. Except, they were exactly what he expected after witnessing the battle trial, the race, and the war of the flags. The tip of the iceberg, and for once, Shouta wished he'd seen the signs before now. That final blow, the one that All Might blocked, caused the larger hero to flinch. It was slight, but Shouta could see it. Years of experience ruled out any other possibility. He hoped that no one else other than Midnight and Cementos noticed. The audience seemed too distracted by All Might's sudden appearance to make the connection. Parker had moved him, the man that Shouta had seen shrugging off buildings falling on top of him and bombs detonating in his face. And that wasn't the worst of it. No quips, no jokes or clown antics. For 5 minutes, he saw Peter Parker more focused than he'd ever been in homeroom or any of the lessons the school employed. It was a dream come true for Shouta in any other situation, seeing his best student give it 100%. Yet in those 5 minutes, Parker dodged. He roared, and when the timing seemed right, he dismantled Bakugo in 2 moves. From the angle, the blonde bomber's shoulder was no doubt dislocated, and the blow to his side more than likely cracked ribs if the force was anything similar to the final blow. Both were moves that, on their own, would have secured Parker the win if Bakugo wasn't such a prideful fool. Except, Bakugo was who he was, and whatever happened before this match and after the Shizaki fight put Parker on a warpath. Hell, he was even yelling and roaring like Bakugo at times during his bout, while it was Bakugo who talked the most, as if the two were emulating each other unintentionally. Nevertheless, the American wasn't going to stop with that blow to the side. The dislocated shoulder only happened because Parker wanted to keep his opponent in the ring. One hit with that kind of strength against All Might was all that was needed to secure the win. Instead, he held himself back like he usually did. But instead of wanting to make sure he subdued someone as quickly as possible, Parker had wanted this fight to last. He'd wanted to make a point. What that point was, Shouta could only guess. The two students had butted heads against one another since they arrived in his class. At first, it was standard from what Shouta could see. Parker ignored Bakugo, and Bakugo pushed himself harder because of it. It was standard practice for UA to allow rivalries to form because some students required that kind of drive to become the best heroes they could be. Admittedly, it was one-sided, but still, it begged the question. What turned it into this? Questions would have to wait. For now, Shouta had to make some calls. The event had been broadcasted live, but Shouta had to make sure that only certain moments went into the highlight reel. All Might's interference could be chalked up to him being him. Anything else the school could handle with ease. For now, the footage was the priority if his students were to continue. If all went well, he could destroy that minute of footage. There were a lot of things that Shinji Kamui Woods could get used to. The constant grind of patrolling, the mountains of paperwork that came with being in a hero agency, and Takeyama gushing about her ward every second that she had the chance. So when the break came and everyone was cheering and hollering as the champion of the festival was crowned, Shinji couldn't help but notice one voice not adding to the chorus. Mount Lady had barely moved since the start of the match, her face still a sheen of scared surprise throughout every action. As the minutes dragged on, she only became even more reserved until she didn't even notice that Shinji had stopped next to her. As the highlight reels rolled and the break table exploded into commotion as dozens of heroes pulled out their phones to call their agencies in response to the last match, Shinji elbowed Takeyama in the side, snapping her out of her stupor. "Oh, Kamui, what's up? You haven't said a thing in 5 minutes, Shinji pointed out, was wondering if you were okay. Me? Takeyama asked before giving off a light laugh. How could I not be fine? Did you see Peter out there? Deflection, standard tactic. One that she played off with her carefree grin and exaggerated hand motions. Might have worked if Shinji hadn't seen it before. Even so, he played along. I did, so did every other hero in the country. A fact that couldn't be more true. The hero sites crashed halfway through the fight with all the traffic going through them. By the time that the sites were back up, chances were the top 10 would have their pick of the finalists, while the rest of them had to do their best with those they could mentor. Yeah, he's got to have like 100 different emails filling up his mailbox. I'm sure he does, Shinji said. He's come so far. I mean, did you see how he jumped over those explosions? Anyone else would have been knocked out, but not him. Then there was those hits one and bang and the boom kid is down. And there she goes, her mouth going a mile a minute, saying so much without going into anything meaningful. Truth be told, he'd have enough. Takeyama, Shinji said, cutting her off. What's wrong? Mount Lady stopped her spiel, and her smile faltered. It became sadder, concerned as she turned back to the highlight reel. I've never seen him like that. Shinji crossed his arms and quirked his eye, focused, determined, no, angry. Now then, on to the awards ceremony, Midnight declared with a raised hand as she gestured to the podium. Momo, however, couldn't get that image out of her head. The blinding fury Peter had on his face, and that roar as he came forth with all the speed and power of a missile. The rest of the crowd was singing his praises and the social media feed was ablaze. Yet, they didn't notice how their champion was truly feeling. Yaoyorozu-san, spoke Todoroki as she turned, seeing the bandaged boy looking at her with concern. You've said nothing during the match. And, yes, I was too engrossed, she replied as the cameras panned to the victory podium, where 2 spots were currently filled. Our third place winners are Shizaki Ibara of Class 1B and Midoriya Izuku of Class 1A. Everyone give it up for the beautiful and deadly mother of nature, and the green lightning flash himself. Mike Sensei hyped up as the green-haired girl stood on the number 3 platform, looking rather bashful and waving. Right beside her, a bandaged Midoriya waved with his good non-broken hand. I'm so happy for Deku. He's made it so far, Uraraka asked, smiling at her green-haired friend. To be fair, he only fought 1 fight though, and that was against Todoroki here, Kirishima pointed out. Not that I'm making light of your abilities though, Todoroki. Just saying that. Well, it's fine. He deserved it. Todoroki cut him off, focusing on the stadium before him. He beat me fair and square. Well, coming from you that's saying a lot, Kaminari stated. Right, Koda? He asked, looking up towards the dinosaur-esque boy who perked up but smiled softly, nodding. Still, Midoriya did get to you because he didn't get to fight against Ada. Where is he anyway? Jiru mused as she sat beside Momo. Yeah, we never saw him come back, and he isn't answering his calls either, Kaminari added with a wave of his phone. What's up with that, I wonder? And due to his current status and being treated for injuries, second place winner Bakugo Katsuki will not be attending the ceremony. But NOOW, we have our first place winner. Yet Momo knew all of that was secondary as she gazed out at her deputy. Peter Peter was standing at the top, healed yet looking absolutely drained. He was smiling, but even Momo can tell that it was a bad smile, one that was incredibly forced. After Pony's defeat at Bakugo's hand, Peter's attitude had become a bit more curt than usual. He'd displayed a ferocity in battle against Shizaki that she had never seen in him. And then he one-upped himself in the fight against Bakugo. Peter usually talked a lot when engaging in some form of combat. She knew that firsthand. He quipped a little during the Shizaki fight yet against Bakugo. He was quiet, save for the yells and roars he had unleashed. Hell, with the look on his face and his yelling, it was like he was emulating Bakugo himself. That last moment though, she looked back up at Midoriya, as he too looked uneasy and worried as he turned towards his friend on the higher podium and towards the empty second place platform. Was it for Parker or for Bakugo? He and Bakugo were apparently friends back in middle school, at least that was what she had heard. The blonde bomber did nothing to back up those claims with his attitude towards the green-haired boy on the other hand. Her arm rubbed her own as she saw All Might wave to the crowd, laughing as the robot came forth with the medals. Congratulations, young Shizaki. Your performance throughout the festival was nothing short of sensational. He beamed, the vine-haired beauty lowering her head to let him place the bronze medal around her neck. However, relying on just your quirk alone isn't enough to overcome a bad situation. Focus on your innate strength, young lady, and the sky is your limit. The symbol of peace declared to the mics present on the stage. Thank you very kindly, All Might sir. I'll take that advice to heart, she said with a bow, looking at her medal. But Momo could see on the feed that her eyes were looking towards her past opponent. The number 1 hero then turned towards a beaming and smiling Midoriya, who also bowed to take the bronze medal. You did well, young Midoriya. You've come a long way from when the school year started. All Might rose to his full height, grinning down at him. You have surprised many people here, helping them as you progressed, and I know that without a doubt your path towards herodom will be a bright one. Midoriya wanted to cry in joy, the waterworks brimming. You are truly plus ultra, and you have truly declared to the whole world. He waved his hand out to the crowd who roared, that you are here, and the tears came like geysers as the green-haired boy wept in utter delight. The crowd laughed good-naturedly, as did All Might, who stepped back, shaking his head but smiling wryly. Well, someone's happy to be up there. Zero jested with crossed arms. You can say that again. Sato added. All right, time for the ace and his reward. Kirishima beamed, and Momo looked to Peter, who still smiled. but his eyes just looked far off. All Might took his steps towards the sullen-looking Peter, his hands in his pockets as he looked to be deep in thought. "Young Parker," he stated with pride as the American boy raised his head, and the gold medal came down. "Congratulations." "Thank you," he uttered, his voice tired and hoarse. "The feats you accomplished today were nothing short of spectacular," he said, with his hands on his hips. "You are at a level that perhaps not even myself was at when I walked on these grounds at your age." All Might placed a hand on his shoulder. Midoriya bit his lip, looking away at that statement. "I hope you can take pride, as you lived up to your opening speech of going further beyond." "Yeah, I did." Peter sighed. "Didn't I?" Momo couldn't see much, but she did see All Might bring him in for a short hug, much to the crowd's approval and Shizaki clapping her hands. Yet why did Peter look so sad? He did the best of any student here. This was supposed to be a sports festival, where everyone was doing their best and putting their best feet forward. Midoriya himself frowned, gazing at Peter, who continued to smile and wave besides the symbol of peace. "Now then," All Might turned, letting go of Peter and standing before the crowd. "Everyone here today has the potential to reach the top, as you all witnessed," he shouted, hands on his hips. "It is through competition and encouragement that helps us thrive, to reach bigger and better heights. For the seedlings you have seen today," his hand was outstretched, as if offering it to the world, "will grow into great mighty oaks of tomorrow, heroes that will go above and beyond." Now then, in that spirit, he reeled his hand back in. "One final cheer. Everyone with me. 1, 2. The entire crowd, along with many homes in Japan and out on the streets, save for the Class 1 suite, a dark domicile above a seedy bar, and a young heroine patrolling the empty vendor grounds. Plus ultra. The chance of it were palpable as All Might had his fist in the air, the yelling deafening. Plus ultra, plus ultra, plus ultra. Yet all Momo could think about was the boy who helped her get this far, not say a word, gazing down at the medal with all the countenance of someone who was in a car accident, unfazed by the constant cheers. Her friend had helped her ever since they first met at that racetrack on the first day, in more ways than one. It was her duty as class representative to help her. Depuno, this wasn't about her position. She had to talk to him soon. How could the situation have deteriorated to this point? Principal Nezu's voice was soft and still largely placid as the teachers spoke in the athletes' hallway, his paws behind his back. "This is an extremely recent development, probably as recent as the fight Bakugo had with the American girl, or even sooner. While the dislike has always been there, it was never this bad, certainly not on Parker's end." Aizawa's voice answered dryly. "The drive Bakugo feels to surpass Parker did benefit his training, but regardless, I've clearly let this escalate much too far." The dark-haired mummy bowed, eyes closed. "I take full responsibility. Tossing blame around will get us nowhere." The mouse bear principal shook his head. "Even in the conflict in the War of the Flags, I did not observe this kind of deep animosity, so I suspect your hypothesis to be somewhat correct. What we need to focus on now is where we go from here. Disciplinary action should be taken," quietly Aizawa stated. He didn't succeed in his attempt due to All Might's presence and acute observations. "Nevertheless, we can't let this action go unpunished." "I find myself forced to agree, but we all lack enough data to determine how severe this punishment should be on Mr. Parker WH. Wait." All Might's voice echoed through the halls for the first time since the conversation began. The two turned to see the massive #1 hero bow at the waist towards Principal Nezu. "As the teacher who stopped the attack, I ask that you grant me a favor. Allow me to speak to young Parker, and then be the one to determine his punishment. Whilst he did stop that attack, I have to disagree. No offense to you, All Might, but you're hardly a disciplinarian at heart." Aizawa rebutted calmly with narrowed eyes. "I'm his homeroom teacher, and I admit that I let Bakugo and Parker's distaste for each other fester so that they can push each other. It's on me, not you." The #1 hero stood back to his full height, looking towards the eraser hero with a gleaming dark blue eye. "He is my student too, Aizawa. I'll allow it," Nezu said, bringing both teachers' attention back to him, Aizawa's expression being neutral. "But I have a condition of my own. Whatever you discuss and whatever punishment you decide on must be discussed and subsequently cleared with me first. We avoided a bullet that would have destroyed UA. I'd rather not be laissez faire about this. Do you understand?" The symbol of peace offered a single, firm nod before turning away from his colleagues and marching towards the locker rooms. Toshinori stood in front of the door, steeling his nerves with a slow, deep breath before reaching forward and opening it with a creak of its hinges. Parker was sitting on a bench in one of the locker rooms, and Toshinori could see that the youth's eyes were puffy and red from crying, still wet tear tracks on his cheeks, nose red. He didn't turn his head, even as his chest was heaving up and down. I really messed up, huh? He asked in English, too distraught to speak Japanese. You did at that, young Parker. All Might responded back in kind, his English as crisp as a Native American speaker. He didn't mince words, now wasn't the time for it. And the young man in front of him was smart enough to know he'd have been lying if he said any different. All Might closed the door behind him, marching forward to sit beside the youth on the bench, the Titanic hero next to a slimmer and much shorter hero in training. It would have been an amusing sight if not for the situation. There was silence between them for a time. Finally, All Might broke it. What happened, Peter? Why such anger? I don't recall ever seeing such rage from you. Toshinori spoke, turning towards the American boy. Peter raised his head to the ceiling, blinking away the tears as he took a deep breath and let out a rattling exhale. We talked before the match and he paused, puffing his lips before seething. He said something, and he closed his eyes, lowering his head. Doesn't matter. No matter what he said, I took it too far. And if you hadn't stopped me, I'm not sure I'd have stopped. All Might nodded once, hands clasped together as he leaned his elbows on his knees. It's good that you recognize that. But you haven't answered my question. Why? What made you so angry? The reason doesn't matter. No matter what he said, it's just... Peter glared at the ground. Fucking words from a jackass. He spat out in a curse. I think it does matter. He argued calmly, but firmly. He would let him vent. He needed it. They descended into silence again. It dragged on for a good, long while before, finally, Parker seemed to gather the strength to speak. Do you know how I got here? All Might. You're an exchange student, P. I got here by losing All Might. He whispered, staring straight at him as he turned towards him, right in the eye. I lost everything. My aunt, my best friends, my classmates, the girl I liked, Mr. Stark. I lost everything. We lost. We tried so hard but we still lost. They're all gone and I couldn't do a fucking thing. Do you have any idea what that's like? All Might's face turned to stone as his heart skipped a beat. Those eyes of his. He knew them. He remembered seeing them in the mirror every day in the days following that one fateful day. He remembered that time clearly. Now, it's your turn. The exhausted yet energetic words of the woman who was both his mentor and mother resounded in his head. I got here because I lost everything and everyone I ever loved. And then Peter's face turned into bitter anger as snarled. Fucking comes in here and says that real heroes don't lose. He said that in Japanese. That the people who lose can't be called heroes and The young man shrugged, returning back to his native tongue. Then he said it again. Even after I proved a point and broke his arm to the point of the match almost being ready to be called in. And, Peter gasped, closing his eyes and shuddering as the tears started up again. I just saw red. I wanted to hurt him. I wanted to make that little shit-faced motherfucker suffer. I wanted him to feel that kind of moment. Peter paused, breathing hard, speaking as slow as he can. And he's never looked so hollow. For him to feel so desperately that he was right, only to lose, all the same. He gulped, wiping his eyes with a towel. Like me, Toshinori tried to place himself in the young man's shoes, tried to think as to how he would have reacted if someone like Endeavor had said something similar so soon after Nana's death. He would not have reacted well. Young Bakugo's ideas, he began, are flawed, boo. He isn't a hero, All Might. Parker sniffed, wiping at his eyes. I don't know what the hell is wrong with everyone, why everyone just keeps looking the other way, but the guy's a thug. He doesn't deserve to be a hero and neither do I apparently. And why is that? Because I messed up. Peter snapped, head in his hands. I was this close to being a murderer. And he broke down, letting out a strangled sob. Toshinori shook his head, placing a hand on the shuddering boy's shoulder. Young Parker, if every hero simply ceased to be upon the first mistake, this world would be very short indeed on heroes. He turned, looking to the boy, allowing his smile to return a bit to his face as Peter faced him. Bakugo's ideas are flawed. Heroes do fail. They fail every day. Toshinori spoke in English, as slow as possible. They fail to save someone. They fail to stop someone. Perhaps they fail to make time for the loved ones that mean the most to them. But failure or success is not the mark of a hero. It's their willingness to keep trying even after they fail. If one keeps trying, then one has not given up. His hand gave Peter's shoulder a soft squeeze. And what determines the strength of a hero is his inability to give up. You have made a mistake, a grave one. And young Bakugo's ideas are flawed and destructive. But you cannot give up on yourself, in the same manner we should not give up on him. Toshinori kept his dark blue gaze locked in on Peter as he remembered that fateful day over a year ago that started on a rooftop and ended on that one day in the street before the sunset. Because I nearly did make that mistake once. I nearly gave up and told someone who has proven me wrong time and time again that he could not be a hero. I failed that young man that day. but I keep trying to do better by his example. Now, I ask you to ask yourself, what would that mentor of yours do? What would your hero say to you? You know in your heart of hearts that it would not be to simply give up. All Might gave a bright and wide smile, remembering Nana's creed to always smile for those in distress. After all, this Mr. Stark you talk about seems like quite the hero to you. Parker's eyes seemed to lose focus for a moment, gazing into a spot on the floor. Toshinori heard his words, whispered as they were. I wanted you to be better. Parker sniffed, reaching up to wipe at his eyes again. Where do we go from here, All Might? The symbol of peace stood, moving to stand in front of the boy as he placed his hands on Peter's shoulders. I will not lie to you, young Parker, your actions were grave and must be handled appropriately. But you can become a hero. You've only fallen down, but here you can stand back up, knowing your mistake. And for every step of the way, he looked down at him as Peter gazed up at him, eyes wide as he looked like he had found God. Know that, I will be there to help you become the best hero you can be. Peter bit his lip, and he leapt up, embracing the titanic hero, burying his head in his chest as he squeezed. He continued to sob, nodding. Thank you. I'll accept anything. My way. All Might nodded, hands allowing him to let it all out. Besides, he had countless yellow pinstripe suits. Tears didn't usually stain. That's good. Just let it all out. Whenever you're ready, I will tell you of your punishment, all right. The American nodded his head, letting out a MHM as he continued to embrace him, letting out the last sobs out. What a sports festival. That sure was exciting. An old man stated as he got off his sofa in his nice cozy house, walking over as he grabbed his cane. Still, that American boy is a strong one, if he was able to make Toshinori flinch like that. He got to the fridge, opening it and jumping up, higher than his small height to grab one of the dozens of taiyaki pastry boxes. Time for dinner. Sorahiko got out his frozen custard fish waffles and placed them in the microwave as he began to wait for them to cook and thaw. In his head, he began to ponder if he would take in an intern this year. Peter Parker was the dazzling star that the media were gushing over if his experience watching prior sports festivals at UA was of any indication. The attention this time was on the freshmen, especially on the group who survived the villain attack on the campus and seeing how they would react under the bright lights. Safe to say, Sorahiko could tell that a good many of that Class 1A group would someday become exceptional pros. Even a scant few from Class 1B had a darn good showing. The vine and horse-looking girl in particular. That war game they'd had was super fun too. Hell, makes me wish they had that back in my day. The pro hero known as Gran Torino chortled to himself as he swayed in his seat, watching the seconds go by on the microwave. He looked out the window, seeing that the sun was beginning to set. For heroes to form teams at random and to respond to a given situation with planning. It was no wonder that the red team was able to force a tie using lesser quirks against superior firepower. However, as much as Sorahiko would love to think about how the media's silly comparisons of Parker to Toshinori were, he had his eye on one student. Toshi's successor, Midoriya Izuku. Toshi said that Midoriya didn't have much control last we spoke. Guess the brat got it handled. He heard the microwave ping. Still, he seemed to be on the verge of winning his soul fight against Endeavor's boy. Why did he push him to use his fire, I wonder? Either way, he can use some of Toshi's full power in certain limbs, but at a cost. If he trains with me, we'll need to have him strengthen his core and overall muscle once a teacher. Always a teacher. He got up and collected the hot plate of nice warmed-up taiyaki, taking it to the table as he blew on it to help it cool. He was grateful that his gloves also acted as oven mitts. They allowed him to grab his treats whenever they were done. Now they would cool faster on a cool dinner, sir. His phone began to ring and Sorahiko blinked. Who could that be? His phone was usually reserved for a select few government agents, Toshinori and his liaison. He walked over to the coffee table near the couch and grabbed his smartphone, answering it while also putting it on speaker. Hello, Gran Torino-san. It was Tsukuichi Naomasa. Tsukuichi. Good evening. How are you? He asked, grinning. Gran Torino-san, I have important news. What could be important that you have to call me? You got that dummy Toshinori. He reached for a taiyaki on his plate, getting ready to bite. To call in, it's about Shimura Nana, sir. The sound of broken china resounded in the room, along with several flopping taiyaki onto the floor. Sorahiko froze, his eyes turning towards the phone. He clenched his jaw, breathing hard through his nose. Tsukichi has never messed around from the times he'd known him. There was a reason he was Toshi's best friend and most loyal confidant. What about? His cheery tone was gone. Gran Torino-san, let me give you the background on how this connects to Yaga's predecessor. The dwarf didn't plop onto his couch, crossing his arms as he glared at the phone, his attention undivided. Me and my team finished up with forensics at the USJ over a week ago, combing the entire facility to ensure that no stone was left unturned. One major thing of note was a certain item worn by the leader of the so-called League of Villains, Shigaraki Tamura. Toshi told me they crafted some monster who was designed to kill him in combat. Sorahiko mused. Yes, but this is not about the Naomu, although the fact that we found multiple blood types and how each finger on the beast was different could be a link to him. To yours and All Might's nemesis. Tsukichi replied. How is all that connected to Nana? Get to the point, Sorahiko asked, remembering those old days. God, it must be a lifetime ago that he remembered her and her smile, her cheery disposition. He breathed softly, doing his best to push back the nostalgia and regrets. Well, the item was a hand. It was used as a mask, and according to eyewitness reports from the other students, Sorahiko's blood became cold as his eyes widened, fearing and wishing that the direction Tsukichi was going for was a farce. The villain had hands all around his arms, neck and hands. Shigaraki was thwarted in a hostage rescue courtesy of All Might's student, Midoriya Izuku. He destroyed the mask that was on Shigaraki's face when he saved Peter Parker, then the hostage. We collected the remnants of the mask, finding most of the hand destroyed, except for the fingerprints. Sorahiko. We ran tests and prints from past files of missing persons. The hand that was on the face of Shigaraki Tamura belonged to Shimura Kataru, Nana's son. Sorahiko walked away, hands on his face as he breathed, doing his best to calm down his heart as this revelation dawned on him. How do you know of this? He hissed, bearing down at the phone as if it was an eyesore. You could be mistaken for all you know. Gran Torino-san, the fact of the matter is that Shimura Kataru was killed 15 years ago, along with his entire family. Sorahiko fell onto his backside, and suddenly the usually pepper and chipper pro hero felt old. So very old. What? I found Shimura's file in a cold case, sir. He was murdered 15 years ago, along with his wife, her parents, and his children at his house. The police at the time dubbed it a homicide, and the media around Kashiki Ward was in a frenzy upon thinking that a brutal serial killer was on the loose. There was bodies, but they were hunks of meat and flesh, sir. Tsukichi spoke, his tone haunting. Scalps and flesh and bones everywhere. We only had identification via dental records to fall back on. The old pro held his face in his hands, covering it up as he did his utmost to stop the tears. Nana, her wish after the death of her husband was to put her son Kataru in the foster care system and distance herself from him. She was a great hero then, one with many allies, and twice as many enemies back then. There were too many villains back when All for One was Japan's Shadow King. All she wanted was to protect him, and he was murdered, with his family, his wife, his children too, Nana's grandchildren. Her family, murdered. Dear God, Sorahiko muttered, looking to the floor. Nana, sir, are you there? Yes, I'm here. He waved, coughing as he grabbed a nearby washcloth and dabbed his face. So, do we know who did it? We don't know. The file states how his house was destroyed, along with the deaths of his family. But there is something of note here. The file wrote off the youngest child as murdered or kidnapped, but there was no body for the former. What do you mean, Tsukichi? The Kashiki PD wrote off Shimura Tenko, a 5-year-old at the time, as a potential kidnapped child, and he's been in the system since then, but there's been no sign. We can only assume that he was murdered either at the scene and his body was taken, or he was kidnapped and God knows whatever else. Shimura Tenko not amongst the confirmed dead. Sorahiko breathed hard, not wanting to dwell on the ramifications of a kidnapped child, just barely a toddler too. So, why tell me and not All Might this? Sorahiko asked, crossing his arms as he did his best to remain as calm as possible. I fear All Might's reaction. If he learned of this, I don't know what he would do. You seem more evenly keeled, Gran Torino-san. The fact is, Shigaraki Tamura has some connection with Shimura Kataru, who in turn has a connection with a monster who has multiple quirks. As Tsukichi spelled it out for him, Sorahiko narrowed his eyes, the gears turning in his head. Yes, he could see what his student would assume, who he would think was responsible for the grisly murder of his master's child and his family. You think All for One is involved? It is possible. All Might seem so relieved to be teaching, happy to have found his successor. If I told him this, All Might may drop being a teacher and focus entirely on finding the League of Villains, who haven't made a peep since the USJ attack, Tsukichi stated. He tends to lead with emotion more often than not. You think more with your head, sir. HNNN, you got a good head on your shoulders. Sorahiko rubbed his eyes. So, need me to help with your investigation then? If you need anything, just ask. I appreciate it, sir, but me and the team have it under control. We'll continue combing through the evidence. I just wanted to let you know, Gran Torino-san. Thanks. Sorahiko's eyes looked to the floor, seeing his spilt taiyaki and shattered plate. Take care. You too, sir. The phone hung up and the old pro sauntered over to behind his fridge, collecting his personal broom and dustpan as he walked back over and began to clean up his mess, tears dropping to the floor past his beard. Nana, I'm sorry. Gran Torino shook his head as he continued to clean. I'm so sorry. And with that, the sports festival for UA's freshmen is over. Our coverage of the UA's prestigious event will go on into the night along with your nightly news. The TV news anchor droned in the background of the sullen-looking residence. Back to you, Toyotomi. So, got an idea of Peter's punishment will be? Hell yeah. Suck it, heroes and parents of Japan. Use Little Ward blew all the other kids out of the water. Take notes everyone, Spider-Man is coming through. Well, that's what she should have been screaming. But Peter hadn't said a thing since he got in the car. Not that you was surprised, not after that final match. From what she saw on the news, Peter hadn't done much talking before she could get off her shift. All she knew was that he had texted her, asking to get out of there as fast as he could. The champion of the sports festival had bypassed all the heroes that he could make connections with or the people that he could talk to just so he could jump into Yu's car the second that her shift ended. So for the first time in a long time, the two sat in silence as Yu tried to navigate the post-festival traffic in town. Yu was used to the streets being full on the normal commute, but this was ridiculous. Right now, there was a small part of her that envied villains. They didn't have to follow stupid traffic laws. Hell, if she just transformed, she could just carry Peter home and be there in minutes. Thoughts of villainous acts aside, Peter shifted in his seat, and the blonde woman cleared her throat. So, your medal's cool, Yu said, holding up the golden circle and displaying a shaky smile, checking out the fine craftsmanship. Yeah, it is, Peter murmured, grinning lightly as he continued to look down at the floor. I knew you were going to kick ass. Shinji thought that you weren't going to do so well, but I never stopped having faith in you. Thanks, Peter shrugged, letting the silence come back in. Yu tapped the wheel before handing over the medal. It's terrible, the traffic. Yu tried, watching Peter pocket his medal before resting his head on the window a second later. Yeah, traffic is bad, Peter agreed, knowing full well that they hadn't moved for the last few minutes. The statement sparked another bout of silence from the normally energetic teen, and Yu once again felt the desire to smash her head against something. Be it the steering wheel or her hand, she didn't care. What the hell was she supposed to do here? There was nothing other than the festival to really talk about, and traffic back home was getting nowhere. You want to go out tonight? Yu asked. I'm thinking Tai, to celebrate. Tai would be great, Peter replied, his tone low. Uncaring. Welp, that settled that. Turning off the road, Yu drove as fast as the speed limit would allow into the central district. The festival made traffic annoying here as well, but it was nothing compared to the roads back home. Yu found a little Thai place outside of downtown in UA, and the two got to work sitting down and ordering their meals. Yu made a point to act cool. After all, no hero outfit, no masks, just the two of them trying to have an easy time so this could blow over, which wasn't helped by all the whispering that they were getting. You could see it. Every now and then, someone would glance at their booth. They pointed at Peter, but at least it was subtle, keeping to themselves. Well, outside of some kids and other teens, whispering in loud hushes. Then the cute waiter came over with some water for the two of them. He even had cute little puppy dog ears too. Hello and welcome to. Hold on, are you Peter Parker? He asked, eyes widening. Yu's ward nodded and smiled as best he could. Why yeah, that's me. I saw you at the festival, man, you were amazing. How did you learn to fight like that? He asked, eager to learn more. Peter's smile shook, and he looked away. Sorry to say, but can we order? Yu asked, not that he doesn't deserve a little praise, but it's been a long day, being the champ and all. She added with a pat on Peter's back, and the waiter gawked, blushing. Right, I'm sorry. He bowed. You're fine, Peter said, waving away the concern. He took their order and Yu sighed. The moment was over, but Peter still flicked the straw of his drink. We don't have to talk about it, if you don't want to, Yu said softly. Did I make you worried? Peter asked, exhaling through his nose. Yu bit her lip. There was a part of her that told her to lie, to try and play things off. But no one appreciated a lie like that. Not really. I was cheering for you while I was on my shift. It was, well, at the end, I still made you worried, sorry. He uttered under his breath, looking at the table's surface. Yu shook her head. Oh Peter, I don't know what happened. Look at me, please. Reluctantly, the American teen glanced up, and Yu shrugged. Don't worry about it. 10 years from now you'll look back on this as just a bump in the road. Peter snorted. I think it's a little bit more than that. Only cause you let it, Yu pointed out. Has anyone at UA talked to you about it? Peter nodded. All Might did. He and Mr. Aizawa are going to decide my punishment. Are you going to go through with it? Peter blinked, taken aback by the question. What? Oh, of course. I deserve it. Then you're fine. You said casually, they know what they're doing, and they'll sort things out with you. And the fact that you're willing will make it all the more easier. Or at least they better, or you and Nermuri were going to have words. Peter nodded again, but the action looked almost robotic at this point. You felt like she was at her wit's end, but she kept herself calm. Peter, I know you don't like it, but look on the bright side. No matter what happens, you still won the UA Sports Festival. You deserve to celebrate a little. Peter shrugged in an I guess fashion. Come on Peter, work with me. Your internship is coming up soon. Aren't you excited? At that, a little bit of life started to return to Peter's eyes. Yeah, I don't know who I'm supposed to go with. He smiled sadly, looking to the side. Haven't checked my emails yet and all that. The blonde woman cheekily grinned. Anyone that you think will help you the most. You said, UA filters a few requests to certain students to give them an edge. After all, you'll have plenty to choose from. Does that mean you're offering? A little part of Yu's heart squealed at the question, but she couldn't say that, not after what Shinji told her. Her shoulders slumped a little. That's on Kamui Woods, she clarified while doing her best to keep his hopes up, but I'm pretty sure that you'll have a lot more to choose from than our little firm. It's not that little, Peter commented, leaning back as the food got to their table. I mean, they did have to redecorate after you kinda destroyed the roux. That was an accident. I didn't want to do it. I just got caught up in the moment. You cried, finding comfort in her drink as she began to pour herself another cup of hot sake. Peter chuckled at that, which was always a good thing. But his expression turned thoughtful almost a second later. Who did you intern under? The pro hero known as Mount Lady paled, and Peter blinked, shocked. Who? You. And no one important? You waved off quickly. It was just a gig with Nemuri-chan. Peter stopped and pondered the name for a moment. Nemuri-chan. His eyes widened. Wait, isn't that Ms. Mid? Oh hey, let's eat. You declared, clacking her chopsticks. Don't want the food getting cold. Peter watched in complete disbelief as Yu wolfed down her meal, but a quick glare made all of his questions fly away. Soon enough, he was digging into his own meal, and for a second, no one glanced their way. It was just the two of them, eating like normal, and that was something that Peter desperately needed. A buzz from a phone came around the end of their meal, and the blonde looked to the side, seeing Peter check it. Momo, he mused aloud. Oh, you perked up. Who's that? A friend of mine. He pocketed his phone. Nothing to worry about. Wait, Yaoyorozu Momo? You asked, and a predatory smirk began to form as Peter bit his lower lip. That girl who rode on that skateboard in the race and acted as a sharpshooter during the water firing those web pellets. Huh. Only Peter knew the formula to that stuff. Which meant, you, not now. First Pony, and now Yaoyorozu. She rested her chin on her fist, grinning widely. She's a friend and I'm her deputy representative. It was just business is all. Peter huffed, puffing his cheeks out. You giggled, patting her ward on the back. Whatever you say. A girl who you shared your web formula with, who is also your class associate. Who also looks absolutely stunning, mind you, wanting to get together with the big-time champion of the sports. It's not like that. Peter cut her off, sipping his water. Man, that's spicy. But me and her just have to talk at some point. It's about business with my class, so sure thing. I won't try and play matchmaker or stalk you or get in the way. Okay, that second part is a maybe booed. The blonde smirked at her brown-haired charge, seeing that the TV was focused once again on the news. Doesn't mean I can't have fun knowing that I'm watching over the next All Might. She gestured to the TV and Peter looked up. Him and All Might standing side by side on the victory podium, with the words Second Coming brazenly displayed next to the subtitles. Second Coming, UA's top prospect Peter Parker dominates, is the next symbol of peace on the way. Peter sighed, rolling his eyes. Lovely, he uttered, finishing up his plate. But I'll deal with it. Hey, you got me supporting ya, and everyone at my office is going to be pulling for ya. You put a hand on his shoulder. I've been with you for a year now, and you're not the type of guy who seems to like the spotlight, as much as the spotlight seems to adore you. Tell me about it. He laughed wryly. But we had a symbol of peace before and didn't have a plan. Now that there is, we got a blueprint, and hey, Peter. You offered a warm smile. You don't have to be like All Might. You want to be like Mr. Stark, don't you? Peter blinked before smiling as he put his hand on hers. Yeah, I want to be better. That's all. The two sat in silence before you finished up her food. She paid the bill and felt the buzz from the sake leave her as they got back into the car. Suo, any other girls in class? You please. Shahahihi. Midoriya Izuku smiled like a madman in his train seat. He couldn't help himself. In his hands, the bronze medal of the sports festival seemed to sparkle. He couldn't believe that it was real. Whenever he touched it, there was a small part of him that was scared, believing it would simply disappear if he closed his eyes. But he blinked and it was still there. He did it. 10 months of hell, a few tough weeks, and he got 3rd place in the event that almost everyone in Japan watched. And the best part, there were professional heroes that were watching. It wasn't the 1st place that he was fighting for, but it was enough. Standing on that podium, he showed the world that he was there and he wasn't going anywhere. But was it enough? He did his best, right? Even with using one for all at 5%. He still had to resort to breaking his fingers against Todoroki. Izuku knew quite well that his broken fingers didn't paint the picture of a well-adjusted hero. As powerful as one for all was, the backlash left his fingers in grotesque shape. Maybe 3rd place would be enough, but there was an equal or greater chance that the sight of the backlash would deter some pro heroes. Izuku mentally made a note to come up with a name for 5% mode. Back on the topic at hand, if that deterrence happened, all his work would be for nothing. He'd let down All Might, disappointing everyone that helped him get here. Mom, All Might, Uraraka, Parker, and his fellow classmates. Settling back in his seat, Izuku fought to keep his eyes open. After all the treatment that Recovery Girl had given him, he was exhausted. It felt like he was going to fall asleep at any second, with the adrenaline from standing on the victory podium fading. He looked around, trying to find something to focus on, eventually finding the TV mounted on the wall. It flashed the news, a muted piece about the results of the festival. Highlights scrolled across the screen. Todoroki's attack on the base during the War of the Flags. His own match against Todoroki. Watching the video, Izuku could barely believe that it was him rushing across the arena while dodging surges of ice. It was so surreal. Next came the medal ceremony, where he got his medal, but the highlights stayed on Parker. The American exchange student got the majority of the screen time. His picture with his gold medal in the corner as a highlight reel of his matches played on the screen. His fight against Kaken got the most attention. The serious look on his face, the way that he weaved through the explosions to get in close. But they didn't play the finishing blow, and personally, Izuku couldn't be happier that they didn't. He remembered sitting there, watching Kaken try and get up to keep fighting. Izuku didn't know why he was surprised at the time. Kaken's drive to win was the only thing greater than his quirk and how he used it in battle. But even that only delayed the inevitable. Izuku knew he shouldn't, but he felt bad for Kaken. His old friend got so close to being #1. All his life his old friend had been his idea of victory. And for him to lose like that, he couldn't imagine what his childhood friend was going through. He didn't get a chance to talk to him. He was still with Recovery Girl, asleep. But the look on Kaken's face when he was carried out on a stretcher, it was similar, like looking in a mirror, or in this case, a computer screen 10 years ago when he found out about that awful truth, that he was quirkless. He was, in that moment, just like Izuku, hitting rock bottom with no one to support him. Hopefully he healed well. He could imagine Kaken returning after the break, more determined than ever to beat Parker and go on to be a great hero. At least, that was what would normally happen with Kaken. Izuku's thoughts were cut off as a breaking news report flashed on screen. He didn't know what the news anchor was saying, but he could at least read the captions. Hero Killer Stain strikes again. Hero Killer. There was a hero killer. By the sound of him, he was a dangerous villain, and that thought was only reinforced as a list of those attacked so far scrolled on screen. High water. Beat back. Sound off. Ingenium. Izuku's blood went cold. That's Ida's brother. His thoughts assumed the worst, but thankfully, the report described the hero as only being in critical condition. Not much better, but he was still alive, and that was more than some of the other heroes could ask for. The other 3 were confirmed fatalities. The thought did little to make him feel better, and he couldn't even begin to imagine what Ida was going through. Izuku didn't know what he was going to say when he saw Ida again. Whatever the case, Izuku's inner thoughts were cut off as the train slid into the station. It was his stop. Struggling to get his backpack over his shoulder with his sling impeding him, Izuku did his best to trek through the crowded station streets. Walking home was a quiet affair, mostly because Izuku took the quick route home. The faster that he could get home and sleep, the better. He got home, flipped open the door, and let his bag fall to the ground. "I'm home," he called. "Welcome home. Can you come to the kitchen?" "No problem," he said, glancing down at his sling. His injuries probably wouldn't go over so well. But Todoroki needed to hear his words, so he had no regrets. A thought that wasn't helped by the fact that his mom would be worried about his broken hand, and that was the last thing Izuku wanted. So with heavy steps he went to the kitchen. "Mom, sorry about this but..." His voice trailed off as he saw his mother standing behind the kitchen table, a candlelit cake waiting there. It was a simple thing, one candle with the number 3 drawn on the top with frosting. There was nothing but happiness in his mother's eyes. "And so proud of you, Izuku." She was on the verge of tears, and Izuku wasn't too far behind as his short and plump mother walked forward, embracing him tightly. She made sure not to hug him too hard around his arm. He didn't know what to say, but neither of them did as she wept in joy, and he patted her back. They just sat down and his mom cut the cake. From the first bite, it was the best cake that Izuku had ever tasted. "Thanks, Mom. You deserve it," his mom said. "You've trained so hard, you got into UA, and you just keep making me prouder." Although, her eyes drifted over to the sling and Izuku wilted, his hand going to his upper arm. Sorry, does it hurt?" "Oh no, not at all," Izuku said quickly. "Recovery girl gave me something so I'm alright. She focused on healing my leg first, but I'll be going by tomorrow for additional treatment." "Well, tomorrow is the second year festival, so you should get there early." "It's alright. Mr. Aizawa is calling all of us in for homeroom for a meeting. Then from there we can go to the second year festival." The two of them ate in silence for a moment before Izuku spoke again. "Do you think I'll get an internship?" His mother stopped, smiling softly. "I don't know as much about heroes as you do, but they saw what happened out there. They saw my boy and he got 3rd place in the sports festival. You'll be fine, I believe in you." Izuku felt tears start to swell in his eyes. "Thanks, Mom." The brace slung around his shoulder. Katsuki barely noticed, his eyes never leaving the floor since he woke up. It was dark out now, late at night. All he remembered was the form of All Might standing between him and Parker. After that, everything was a blur. There was the medical ward. He'd woken up with a medal next to him and a brace on his arm. All of his stamina was used by Recovery Girl to fix his chest. 3 broken ribs at the very least, and that wasn't even the worst of it. He would have to spend the next day in this brace, but another checkup with Recovery Girl tomorrow would heal him to 100% for sure. He didn't say a word on his entire trip to the parking lot, walking through the lit but empty halls of UA's main campus. His parents were in the car waiting at the curb by the entrance to UA, but could not enter due to it being 11:15 at night, and the upgraded security the school had in place due to the USJ incident and the sports festival. They weren't taking any chances. Recovery Girl noticed Katsuki's silence, but she stopped asking questions after the first few minutes. She knew a hopeless battle when she saw one, like he should have. Katsuki glanced down, rubbing his wrist and giving his arm a lazy roll. He winced a little. His chest was fine, but his arm would stay like this till tomorrow. He remembered Recovery Girl as she healed him then. He didn't look up, but he could imagine her face. She was doing her job, being concerned for him, pitying him. She asked something else, but Katsuki didn't hear what it was back then. He just let his fingers curl in and out of his palm. He took a deep breath and waited. Nothing, no sound, no anything. He just nodded dumbly when she asked him questions. Everything he did was focused on his good arm, watching his palm. In the center, a single bead of sweat waited, but it did nothing. He shook in his seat, an action so subtle that he could barely hide it. Come on, a sound, a spark. Nothing, and he remembered the look in the nurse's eyes. And then All Might coming to save him. More pity, pitying a loser. Trash. That wasn't what he was. He was Bakugo Katsuki. He was going to be the next All Might. He had the best quirk in the entire fucking school. No one should ever pity him. So why did it feel like even making a spark wouldn't be worth it? Without any fanfare, he gently opened the door leading into the main building of UA. Thankful for the empty hallways save for the security and janitorial drones. He kept walking, putting one foot in front of the other, and thankfully, he could still do that right. Even so, he walked with his hand close to his face. A small bead of sweat rested in his palm. It could go off at any second. Just one thought, one little push without anyone coming into. Young Bakugo. Save him. The blonde bomber let his hand fall to the side, looking at the towering figure of the symbol of peace staring down at him from the end of the hallway. A small part of him wanted to sulk and look away, blow off the larger man. But he didn't. All Might wanted to talk to him. It was going to happen no matter what. He was up late it seemed. "Yeah?" Katsuki asked, his voice hoarse. "I was just coming by to see how you've been coping." All Might explained. "Coping, good word." The blonde shifted his bag. "I'm fine." He turned around, only to freeze as a massive hand was placed on his shoulder. He glanced back, and the symbol of peace's smile was smaller, more personal. Katsuki didn't recognize the smile, full of concern, but more than anything else, there was understanding in it. He gave a light scoff. How on earth could he understand anything? He was All Might, the #1 hero. Everything in the world fell to one punch from him. All Might never stopped winning. "You did the best you could, young Bakugo. There is no shame in how it concluded." "I lost," he hissed out in response, baring his teeth. He tried to push the hand off his shoulder. All Might let him go, but not before stepping closer so as to make it clear he still wished to talk. And then the symbol of peace sighed. Defeat is true of all heroes, young Bakugo. We've all experienced You've never lost. He snapped, interrupting the number one hero and moving to leave. He didn't need this. Didn't want this. Of all the people he didn't need All Might coddling him, pitying him. You're wrong. The words stopped him cold in his tracks, eyes widening. I have lost before, young Bakugo. I failed to save someone once before and her death still follows me to this day. That was my failure. The symbol of peace invaded his vision, standing in front of him and placing a hand on his shoulder once again. I remember saying to you that pride is a valuable thing to have, but so is understanding. I'll tell you this now, you have more of both than I did at your age. Back then, I thought that everything could be decided with a punch, that if I simply swung hard enough, that every problem in front of me would disappear. I learned very quickly that such a belief wasn't the case. Stop. Don't say anymore. Just shut up. You're the symbol of peace. Katsuki pleaded mentally, biting his lower lip. I found myself pitted against an opponent that I couldn't beat by using only my fists. You're not supposed to lose, so just stop talking and take it only as a lesson, young Bakugo. Failure shines a light on our faults and allows us to move forward into the shut up, you liar. The symbol of peace stopped, surprise overtaking him at the sound of the growl coming out of the blonde's throat. Katsuki was a little surprised as well, but he didn't care. What the fuck do you think you're talking about? He asked, gritting his teeth. Do you think I don't know that? That's the same crap that a school teacher spouts out. And now you're just like that fucking snake, Deku, lying through your teeth just like he did for 10 fucking years. All Might flinched back, young Bakugo. I didn't lose. Bakugo screamed, tears burning in his eyes. That wasn't a fight, he said, his throat feeling hoarse, because he could see it. The look in Parker's eyes when he finally stopped playing around. His side burned with a phantom pain at the single hit that took him out. The utter demonic rage that took over the American throughout the fight. And the look in his eyes when he kicked him. And then when he charged with all the speed and force of a missile, yelling like a wounded animal. A hit that, as the last few seconds proved, could have happened at any time. I didn't stand a chance, Katsuki whispered, his hands shaking as he looked down at them, feeling his heart sink. For so many years, the source of his powerful almighty quirk. Defeated in only 2 blows. I wasn't his opponent, I had so little chance that you had to stop him. He stared up at the man that the world called number one. I didn't ask to be rescued. He screamed. I didn't want to be rescued. And I didn't want to be told anything about you. He held up his hand, glaring at the single bead of sweat that refused to combust. You see this? This is the best quirk in this school. It's what was going to make me number one. Rich, famous, my family and future generations wouldn't have to work a day in their lives again. But now look at it. I got saved again because I was weak. Fresh. In front of the whole fucking world too. The blonde bellowed, spittle flying from his lips. You shouldn't have come down there. I didn't ask to be fucking saved by you. Katsuki roared, eyes red as he did his best to swallow his self-doubt. To fight back the flood. You should have. He gasped, panting as his eyes widened with the acknowledgement of his words. You should have. The anger and self-loathing deflated out of him, and his hair covered his eyes. His arm fell to his side, and he felt his phone vibrate again. Aye, he sniffled, barely being able to force the words out of his mouth. I need to go. He turned around, and the only weight on his shoulder was his backpack. Young Baku, leave me alone. And he dashed for the stairwell, slamming open the door. He was thankful that it was isolated. It was getting too fucking misty in the hallway. If he couldn't win a single meaningful fight here at this school, if he wasn't at the top, like everyone around him said he would be. He shook his head, he just wanted to get home. He went down the stairs, out the exit and made his way to the parking lot in the humid night. Ahead, he could see his parents call and his father come out, running toward him. Mom stayed in the car. He didn't hear his father's words or how he embraced him. He just wanted to go to bed. Maybe this was all some kind of bad dream. The festival, how he loved to hear the sound of the highlights as they rang from his monitor. It was so lovely to hear the champions peacock themselves before the masses. A performance so elaborate, to dazzle and confuse the people of Japan that their heroes could spend their time pretending that the evils of the world weren't knocking on their door. After his apprentice's attack, it was close to the only option available to them. Even so, no matter how admirable the goal, it was one that was easily exploited. Had he been in his prime, he would have sent Gigantomachia to the outskirts in order to wreak havoc. A loud, purposefully boastful statement to show just how pathetic the attempt at portraying peace really was. Except, he was not the one meant to lead the hordes. Tamura must be the one to make such a statement, one with more grace than the previous plan. In years past, there was none who would dare to challenge him. The mere act of pretending that he wasn't supreme was enough to draw his ire. At first vexing were these days that he had to sulk in his chair, only finding relief within his quirks and the good doctor's machines. Now, patience had given its reward in the form of Tamura Shigaraki. The grandson of the last great wielder of his little brother's legacy had been silent since the second event of the Great Distraction started. According to the good doctor, the young villain hadn't so much as blinked as he watched. Good, something had drawn his attention. And even if it was little more than watching the participant of his vengeance, it was still observing. Now, a simple test. Now, Tamura, what did you see? He'd had a few hours to absorb it all. A bunch of fucking brats, came the response, every word dripping with barely contained wrath. And a bit slurred. Kurogiri must have been giving him some bourbon. Good, for a start. However true that may be, these are the prospects that will grow to oppose you in the future. So I ask again, what did you see? A pause, the silence filled only by the crackle of static. They're all pathetic. None of them went for the kill when they should have, except those two. All for one raised an eyebrow. Oh, the brat from Endeavor, he showed his enemy their place. And the spider when he went against the blonde. He had the right idea. A rather interesting development, Kurogiri commented, from what I have witnessed. The aggression he showed during the festival was non-existent till that point. Not even in his fight against the Namu did he show such ferocity and power. A fleeting fancy in the heat of battle. All for one dismissed the previous observation. No matter how civilized these heroes act, all succumb to their base desires when pressed. Although, given the media coverage of this, peterparker, he is someone to keep an eye on. After all, we failed to snuff him out then. He heard Tamura snarl over the line at that. He may grow to be a dangerous adversary. Kurogiri wisely kept any additional comments to himself. If questioned, All for One had the perfect counter to whatever idealistic thought that could be brought forward. For all he smiled, all he pretended to be the savior the world needed, even All Might gave in to his rage when the time came. That beast, raging towards him, his fist burying itself in All for One's head even as his guts fell out of his body. As the so-called next All Might, a fitting moment of rage was nothing out of the ordinary. In fact, from the report that the good doctor had transcribed for him, each of the young students of All Might were progressing within expected bounds save for this American. A single outlier was nothing to focus on. Well, aside from the spider and this Midoriya child, who seemed to have shown a great deal of control since the USJ according to his intelligence sources. The true focus must be on the advantage that this time brings. He needs to die, Tamura hissed. Him, that green shrimp, that whore, all of them. Kurogiri, another. The tap of a glass against the counter was heard. And they will, All for One drawled, you must remember your goal, Tamura. It'll just be a quick trip. One search, a car drive, and a touch is all it would take. He growled. Them, and their precious little families too for good measure. Oh, he's going that route is he. Now Tamura. All for One's voice got a bit stern. It's one thing to plan revenge, but you're thinking too lofty, too early. They took a piece of father away from me. The youth barked, so I'm gonna take at least a piece from them. No, fuck that. I'll take everything from them, because that's I want. He hissed from his communicator, followed by the sound of breaking glass, the symbol of evil side. And if you do that, Tamura, think. What happens next? The media darlings that survived your attack and you finished the job, where said darlings are also All Might's young charges. His voice sounded out within his domicile, and he could hear the teal-haired youth scratch his neck on his end. The heroes would come, wouldn't they? He spoke, dejected, with all the rage and fury of angry gods. We will dismantle this society and destroy our enemies, but not yet. It is too soon and we are too few in number. That is a threshold we cannot cross. Not yet. All for One rested his chin on his fist, taking a deep breath as he felt the doctor attach a new IV drip. Few in number, so we can kill those fucking brats if we had. Party members, right. Ah yes, video game analogies. Well, whatever helped his protege understand. Yes, All for One smiled. You must form a party, gather allies, earn their respect, find common ground. And once you're strong enough, then whatever you desire will come true. The older villain could hear his protege chuckle darkly before he paused, then let out a gasp. Must have taken a swig from another glass his minion provided him. But, where do I start? All for One was surprised, but he didn't show it. Were he a lesser man, he might have flinched at the question, along with the tiny but noticeable growth in sensibility that the question implied. You need not stress over the details. No matter the situation, you will have allies that will offer their services. Even now, everyone within your current group has their own prerogatives and walks through their own circles. Never be afraid to ask or demand information from those who might have it. To start, Kurogiri, he said, and he was sure that the misty bartender stiffened slightly at the mention of his name. Tell me, in your opinion, what villains have been making the rounds that would suit Tamura's ambition? Not many, I'm afraid, Kurogiri admitted, earning an annoyed grunt from Tamura. But it was a good answer. Tamura would need subordinates that were more interested in telling the truth of the situation than lie and lead him into a false sense of security. After the attack of the USJ, most villains have gone underground for fear of All Might coming down upon them. However, there is one that does not care for the havoc that he has caused. The warp villain stated. Oh, All for One asked, feigning surprise. He'd already discussed this potential recruit with the doctor beforehand. Kurogiri, knowing of him, simply made the conversation easier to suggest to Tamura. There have been reports of a villain moving around the greater Tokyo area, killing and leaving before reinforcements have arrived. He goes by the moniker Stain, and already the media have dubbed him the Hero Killer, a grandiose title held by many in All for One's day, but it was good to hear that it had found a new master, one that strikes at the heroes from the shadows and continues his crusade alone. He would be quite the party member, would he not? All for One asked, leaning back in his chair. Yeah, Tamura admitted, his tone evident of him grinning darkly. Don't know the guy, but he sounds like my type of villain. And at that, All for One couldn't help but smile back at the young man who shared his name. Toshinori sighed, deflating into his skeletal form as he saw the Bakugo family's car leave the grounds, and he walked down the halls, hands behind his back. The boy clearly shouldn't be left alone, yet he couldn't chase after him. He might only make it worse. Perhaps a good night's sleep would do him good. Still, to call him a liar, that stung. To call Midoriya one as well. It must be how he rationalizes how young Midoriya started having a quirk. The blonde man mused to himself as he walked down UA's empty silent halls. He could remember running through here without a care in the world. Back then when Sorahiko was his homeroom teacher, and the hero who took him in was Nana. Even when he fell, he got back up thanks to his own efforts, but also from Nana and Sorahiko's encouragement. He wouldn't be here if not for them. He reached down to his phone, pulling it out and tapping on a special app made just for him. Timer, 2 hours 43 minutes 43 seconds. So my 3-hour limit still stands. I was getting a bit weak there, he mused to himself. He could have hung onto his form for another 20 minutes, but the less taxing on his body the better. Toshinori turned his eyes out to the Musutafu skyline, wondering, pondering. Someone out there may be in trouble, and he couldn't help them. Sure, there were agencies that specialized in herodom during the night, but if he could just help any civilian. No, that mindset of not trusting his contemporaries to pull their weight resulted in the USJ. He had promised Nezu in private to focus solely on being a teacher save for villain cases of dire importance. A promise of such weight had to be kept. Speaking of, he opened the door to the principal's office, seeing the Bear Mouse headmaster of East Asia's finest hero school at work on his console, phone to the side. Ah, Yagi, glad to see you've come. The white bear mouse gestured to the couch, the slimmer symbol of peace obliged, walking over and sitting on the couch. I'd normally ask if you'd like any tea or coffee, but I feel given the time of day that such an offer is out of the question. Yeah, so, our plan for Bakugo and Parker. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. We were going to choose who they were going to internship with, right? Not exactly. Nezu leaned back in his seat. The words I would choose are strongly suggest, the principal stated. If we choose their internships ourselves and strip them of their choice, and if something goes wrong, we'd be in quite the pickle. True, we would be liable if things go south. Not something to add on to their plate with critics still on UA's case due to the insistence on still hosting the sports festival in light of the USJ attack. Toshinori looked to the side. So, do I just double up on young Parker's punishment then? Not entirely. I got an email from Aizawa saying that he has an additional method as well, for both Bakugo and Parker. Something that can help them both in the long run, and it got me thinking. Nezu closed his eyes. Those two have the chance to be at the top of the next generation of heroes with their powers, work ethic, talent, and many other attributes. While it is true that we must punish Parker accordingly and ensure that Bakugo's behavior going forward will not be tolerated, we must find a fine balance for our discipline. One that is fair and that will help the two grow. He then got out of his chair with a grunt, hands behind his back. So I've been thinking all day after the festival on who to call to offer internships to both Parker and Bakugo. Ironically, he smiled, looking back at the pinstriped skeletal man with a beady-eyed smile. Both heroes I called never bothered sending offers to those two. Really? Toshinori quirked an eyebrow. He figured that both Bakugo and Parker would dominate the field in terms of offers, alongside Endeavor's son and Shizaki. Shouldn't they be at the top? Oh no, Parker is indeed at the top. His inbox was flooded with heroes from Hokkaido all the way down to Okinawa. Nezu laughed. Bakugo had quite the reception as well, although he lags behind a few more of our students as well. I just find it funny that the two I called didn't even send offers to the two. He closed his eyes with a grin. Amusing how things turn out, no, I suppose. Toshinori mused as he sat up straight. So, what can I do to help? Should I make the call to both heroes? I did it myself, and I got through to one. Nezu walked over to Toshinori, handing him his phone. The blonde took it and saw who the mouse bear called, as well as the history and length of the phone calls. Odd choices. I see he talked with you for a while. We had a nice chat, and in the end we came to a consensus after he learned of my plan. He is more than willing to take in Bakugo, should the boy accept. Nezu nodded. All Might looked at the second call, which took about 30 seconds. What happened with? Oh yes, that one. Had 3 choice words when I offered them the chance to have Parker as an intern. Nezu coughed. The answer was, and I quote, "Go fuck yourself." He kept his smile on, not being fazed. Toshinori's eyes widened, well, considering who Nezu was calling. But he had an ace in the hole. Well, in that case, leave it to me. Toshinori bulked up, and All Might showed off his pearly grin. For I am here, and I know exactly what to say. Nezu had a slight smile on his face, almost as if he already knew. That's so. Yeah. Toshinori slimmed down, sighing and coughing a bit as he took out his kerchief. A tiny speck of red was now visible on it. Maybe not do it so instantaneous next time. Let's just say that said hero owes me a favor, on top of other things. He gave a bony grin. Then make the call. Once you do, we can all get a good night's sleep. Nezu sighed, getting back onto his chair and slumping. For a creature who was the first animal to have a quirk, and being one of the most intelligent creatures in the world, he looked so very human. I think we all need it at this point. He looked over as Toshinori bulked up, calling the number again. Good evening. For I am here, in Principal Nezu's office, All Might declared with a pose, and Nezu chuckled, closing his eyes as he saw the symbol of peace get to work. The only way those two would grow was if they stepped out of their comfort zone. That would be how Peter Parker and Bakugo Katsuki ascended to the top. Alright class, Shouda muttered as he walked into homeroom. Today wasn't a typical class day, as today was the second-year sports festival. But after yesterday when everyone went home, he sent them all an email to return the next day. Settle down. His eyes scanned over his students, taking note in the main group of interest sitting by the window. In the back, Yaoyorozu Momo was sullen, her eyes forward but sometimes glancing at the boy in front of her. She looked deep in thought as well. Peter Parker was neutral-faced, giving Aizawa his full attention, frowning. He'd have to talk to him once he wrapped things up regarding him and Yagi. Midoriya Izuku did not look like a boy who was happy winning third place in the sports festival, instead looking down at his desk and at times glancing ahead to the boy in front of him, and at the empty desk across the room where Ida would normally sit. Bakugo Katsuki was pale, red-eyed. His head was resting on his arms as he looked like he was looking someplace far away, even with his eyes looking downwards. It looked like he hadn't slept a wink. Ironic considering his own typical state. I understand a great many of you are exhausted from yesterday's events, so I'll make this as brief as possible. Those of you who need to see Recovery Girl can do so after class, as she is going to be tied up with the second-year sports festival all day, and she won't do the third years tomorrow until the afternoon. After our homeroom meeting, you are also welcome to attend the second-year festival as well at your own leisure, or if you feel that you can use this time to catch up on your studies, use the library. Do whichever you like. Now, Shouda scratched his light beard. His face was healed, but his arm was still in a sling. I should get this out of the way. Congratulations to you all for your first sports festival yesterday. You all performed to the best of your ability out there, some more than others, but nevertheless, you left everything you could muster on the table. Shouda's eyes noticed Sato frown lightly, looking to the ground. Sato, he spoke out, earning the muscular boy's attention. Keep your head up. Despite your last impression, you were solid in all other areas. Refine your strengths and train harder. The boy sat up straight, nodding. Right? Shouda's tired eyes went over to Yaoyorozu. Yaoyorozu, he had the girl's focus. You had a bad matchup in your tournament round, but you shine in the previous events. Don't let it get you down. Hone in on your weaknesses and seek to improve. The girl, while frowning, nodded. Thank you, sensei. Somehow her depressed mood didn't seem to be more towards the sports festival. His eyes turned towards Asui, who raised her hand. Yes, you don't have to worry about me, sensei. I'll just train harder is all. Girl was sharp, and seemed to have an understanding of her own weaknesses, even if he could see her eyes shift towards Parker. Good, saved me time. He turned towards Jiru. Zaru, you did well utilizing your quirk in the war, although your physical attributes could use improvement if you ever want to defeat close-range opponents. Focus on improving your hand-to-hand combat. Understood. The punk girl's attention was also focused on her friend, Yaoyorozu. Got it. Todoroki, he spoke towards the dual-haired boy. You overcame a high hurdle, but now you'll need to focus on controlling your left side. Todoroki closed his eyes, nodding. You've gotten great control of your ice, so I know you can do it. Understood. Todoroki went back to looking at his desk, deep in thought. Midoriya, the boy perked up. You've come far, farther than any student I've had in this class. The green-haired teen gulped, biting his lower lip. I'm proud of your accomplishments, but you can't keep relying on using your quirk at maximum power. Keep on training and refining it. Midoriya nodded, although his eyes were on the almost zombie-like Bakugo. Alright, we'll wrap up now. You're all getting a 4-day weekend as well. Many of his students perked up, some overjoyed and eager. The window aisle didn't so much as flinch at the news of a very rare break. Today is the second-year sports festival, and tomorrow after the third years, followed by striking down the festivities over the next 2 days. Use this time to heal up, recover, and study. The scouting reports and your internship offers from the pros will be back when you return from break. He saw a hand be raised. Yes, Midoriya. Mr. Aizawa. Ida hasn't come back yet. Midoriya looked up, looking worried. Is there something wrong? He asked, almost as if he knew. The ever-so-observant Midoriya. Shout aside. There's been a family emergency. Ida is all right, but give him space. When the time is right, be sure to offer your support. This goes to everyone here in class, okay? He asked, leaning forward on his desk. Midoriya seemed to almost slump, as if he had come to a realization. Must have figured it out. He saw nods and yeses from the class. Content, Shouda nodded. Alright, class dismissed. Have a good 4-day weekend and enjoy the second-year sports festival. Just use your school IDs and you'll get free admission and refreshments around the stadium. He saw the entire class shift, ready to move and enjoy the weekend as many of them eyed Parker, as if ready to pounce in an effort to talk to him. Parker, he had the American's attention as he gestured with his head. A minute. The rest of the class seemed to understand the cue, with Bakugo leaving first, walking fast with his eyes to the floor. The shaggy-haired teacher stepped aside, seeing Midoriya trot after him. Kaken, wait. No running in the halls. Shouda sternly called to his students as they filed out. Wonder what Mr. Aizawa and Parker are gonna talk about. Hagakure mused as she spoke to Ajiro. Beats me. Maybe it has something to do with getting first place. The tailed boy pondered. Heh, knowing Ace, Sensei's gonna teach him all the ropes, I bet. Kirishima smirked. I mean, he is the next All Might after all. He threw his American friend a smirk and a thumbs up. Parker weakly waved back at the recognition. Soon all of the students departed, Todoroki and Yaoyorozu being last as they each gave a look towards Parker, who remained in his seat, eyes to his desk. Shouda saw the girl stand by the door for a moment before she noticed his staring and left. Shouda sighed, his one good hand in his pocket as he turned towards the American. So, did All Might talk to you yesterday? Yes, he did. Parker responded, looking back at his homeroom teacher. All right, in that case. Shouda leaned against the wall. What did he tell you, and what are you going to be doing going forward? Time to learn of All Might's discipline. The American sighed. Well, Principal Nezu, with help from All Might, we'll be working together to try and find the best fit for me. He said I can still choose my own hero, but they feel that the hero they are choosing will be best to help me improve. Lastly, I'll have to do community service at a local center, 200 hours total, and this will be on top of my schoolwork under you. His voice seemed slightly hoarse, and going by the look on his face both after the fight and during the ceremony, he seemed genuinely guilty. This was what Shouda had wanted, for Peter Parker to be as serious as possible, and it almost resulted in the possible dissolvement of UA. Talk about a monkey's paw. Shouda closed his eyes, nodding. All right, in that case, I won't get in the way. Your fight with Bakugo was out of the ordinary, so I can only assume he said some choice words that drove you that far. Thou, he did, and I shouldn't have let them get to me like that. Parker's eyes were to the ground. Someone with your level of physical strength can't afford to lose his temper so easily. I had thought you understood that. I do. Peter muttered, eyes to the table. Recent events say otherwise. He was twisting the knife, he knew, and judging by the way Parker cringed, he was hitting it right on the pommel to boot. The homeroom teacher of Wanna reached inside his desk, pulling free a file and placing it in front of Parker. The young man opened it. It was his file, the one Shouda had made shortly after the quirk assessment test. Circled in bright red marker was a single number titled Estimated physical strength, 2,874 pounds. I have a strong feeling that this initial figure was lowballing it by quite a lot. Aizawa said lowly, hand once again in his pocket. But even that would have been too damn dangerous to lose control of. If All Might had been a second too late, hell, if he hadn't been as observant as he was while still looking for it because he saw something wrong. How much damage would you have caused? Parker. A lot, I know, he yelled, eyes closed as the inner turmoil raged inside him. Shouta looked at the young man for a long time. I hope that's true. You're a smart kid, but sticks and stones, Parker. You've done a good job limiting yourself, and this one time coup. I know, okay, Parker barked, panting while slumping in his chair. Leaning against his desk, the teacher decided that enough had been said on the subject for the time being. Anyways, before you go to the second-year festival, I should tell you that the winner of the sports festival also receives invitations to I-Island, specifically to attend the I-Expo, a science exposed to show the latest in technology and support gear. Kaboom! The door was suddenly, completely and utterly destroyed, shattering into a million splinters as Shouta was thrown off his feet, landing on his backside. He stifled a yell, his broken arm lighting up in pain. What the hell is wrong with you? He yelled before coughing. Through the cloud of destroyed splinters that used to be a door, Shouta caught sight of the pink-haired Hatsume, covered in motor oil and grease, with a manic grin on her face as she floated forward on her hoverboots. HOHA, I found ya, she hollered, at a decibel level just shy of deafening. He saw Parker leap to his feet in utter bewilderment. Hatsume, what the hell are you doing here? With a speed that should have been impossible even with that equipment of hers, the support course student closed the distance on a still very confused Peter, shoving the helmet onto his head. Put this on. Hello, Hatsume, what the hell? This thing barely fly-oh. Is that a wire digging into my head? Oh yeah, a quick modification so it'd stop exploding. Wait, what? She pressed a very big, prominent red button. The helmet turned on as Parker glanced to and fro. What the what's with all of these bright screens? Baby number 43, a Neuralink hacker helmet that makes you able to access any and all devices in a 20-meter radius. We're gonna need it for what comes next. Maybe, the mad witch of a student declared. Can you see anything? You destroyed my door and used an explosive in the hallway. Shouta barked, but Hatsume turned, grin still on her face as she didn't look at all fazed by the glaring teacher. Just bill it to Mr. Power Loader. Now come on, Parker. She floated up, grabbing the American by the hand. Shouta had erasure activated, his eyes glowing and bandages coiling like snakes. Not a moment to lose. And she sped off, avoiding Shouta's bandages as they smacked into desks. And Peter wailed as he hung onto her, and was flailing like a flag in a hurricane. Or more precisely, a flag on the back of a speeding sports car. Tally-hoo, she exclaimed as she whooped down the hallway, ignorant of Parker's cries for help as Shouta coughed at the smoke. He followed, seeing a trail of smoke down the hallway, and an utterly bewildered and stunned Pony Tsunotori standing by the stairwell, gobsmacked at the display. Why she was standing there, the erasure hero didn't know. Shouta sighed, good hand going to his face. Majima, if you don't strangle your student for this. He turned, seeing the splintered door and the mess in his classroom. I will. Oh, he winced, holding his arm. Chiyo is going to chew my ear off. He had to talk to him. Kaken, Izuku called out as the slumping Kaken walked away. He finally caught up to him, his hand on his old friend's shoulder. Get lost. The blonde lashed out with an arm, and the green-haired boy stepped back, avoiding it as he got a better look at his childhood friend face to face. His red eyes were filled with self-loathing, his teeth bared as he breathed hard through his nose. Kaken, you don't look so well. Izuku gulped, seeing him in such a state. It made his heart twist. This was unnatural. I'm going to see Recovery Girl one last time. He showed off his bad arm, it was still in a sling. Then I'll be out for a little while to heal, so get the fuck out of my way. He hissed in a dark tone, turning around. Izuku blushed a bit, rubbing behind his head. Well, I need to go to her as well. Hand and all that. He flexed his hand that had bandages and splints in them. Kaken didn't respond or cared, still walking forward, entering a stairwell. Izuku walked faster to keep up with him, entering the isolated area. What to do? Well, Kaken lost for the first time in a full-on fight. Izuku has had loads of those in his day. Listen, Kaken, I know what. No you don't, so stop right now, Deku. Kaken growled, turning around, and Izuku gasped lightly. It looked like he was about to break down into tears. You'll never understand, so don't fucking bother. But nothing. He barked loud. You're enjoying yourself, aren't you? I saw the highlights. I saw the ceremony. Kaken raved as Izuku stepped back. How All Might hugged you. How you've looked so smug and proud of yourself. He gritted his teeth, shuddering. for lying to me for all these years, just to get to this point. Izuku bit his lip. Was he still on that? Deep down he cursed himself. He and his big mouth, but he couldn't just keep it inside him like that. He had to tell him. It was only natural. And on top of that, your quirk is just like All Might's. Just like him. Kaken burst out, his shoulders shaking. And you've always wanted to be like All Might too, you know? Well, you and him are closer than ever the way you two were so buddy-buddy, being fucking liars. What? Izuku asked. All Might lied to Kaken. About what? All Might never loses. At all. And you, why is it that a fucking lying snake like you, who's gotten this far? He shuddered, pausing as if he was ready to crack. Winning again and again, while I've gotten here on my own goddamn merit. I've busted my ass to get to the school of my dreams. I've studied hard. I worked and trained harder than anyone. And all I've done since coming here is lose. His red eyes were looking wet as the despair poured forth. This place has become a fucking nightmare. And it's all because of, Kaken yelled, and Izuku could see other students who were outside opening the door, some cracking it to peek in. Because of, Izuku waited, and deep down, all he wanted to tell Kaken was the truth, that he had inherited All Might's power. If that could bring his friend any sort of peace, he would, even with all the hypocritical things he said. But he couldn't. Kaken, please stop, Izuku pleaded, feeling his chest ache. Kaken was his symbol of victory. He wasn't supposed to act like this. It's okay. It's not. I wasn't supposed to lose. Kaken stood up, and Izuku can see it. His face contorted into an expression of pure sorrow and despair, tears streaming down. Not in front of the whole world. Not to that Chloe. Not to Parker. He could have ended it all immediately. But he played with me like I was a toy. I was helpless. I had been saved again, like some useless piece of trash. He wailed, chest shuddering as he paused, gasping as he heaved, unable to finish his sentence. Izuku bit his lip, and he reached forward. Get away from me. The blonde barked, almost fearful. Izuku on instinct moved away from Kaken's slap when he got in close, the two backing off as Kaken seethed as his bad arm hit the window behind him. He saw the blonde boy that for so long has been his idea of victory, of overcoming any obstacle. Just slump against the wall, exhausted, defeated. Deku, Kaken spoke, his voice hoarse as he got his bearings, his hand over his slinged arm, and Izuku felt sick. His action in trying to give his childhood friend comfort only caused him pain. Just leave me alone. He lifted his head, his eyes hollow, lifeless. The eyes of a man who had lost his dream. It made Izuku's blood turn to ice, his eyes widening. Please, he pleaded, and Izuku saw tears coming down. And he walked off, and the current carrier of One for All could do nothing but watch his friend go, shambling like a zombie as he went down the stairs. Izuku has achieved so much since coming here he's lost count. Friends, acknowledgement, support, steps needed to achieve his dream. Yet, was Kaken going to wind up being the cost? The green-haired boy stood silent, unsure of what to do as he gripped his fists, shoulders shuddering. What should I do? Izuku thought to himself. What can I do? Hatsum, let me go, Peter yelled, hanging on via one arm as the girl sped through the hallways. The pinkette ignored him, grinning widely as they made sharp turns that caused Peter to yell and gasp as if he was on a roller coaster. Here we are. And she stopped, twirling as the two's momentum made them spin like a top before they fell. So that's it on max speed. Guess I gotta make some adjustments to the speed output. Peter heard Hatsum's musings as he was sprawled on the ground, seeing the lights overhead spin in circles. He looked down, seeing Hatsum on top of him, her black tank top clad chest squishing against his own stomach. And he got a very nice view. Oh hey, I see lots of ya. Hey, Parkier, Hatsum giggled, her tone implicit that she was too dizzy to notice or care that her cleavage was prominent. Peter scrambled to his feet, cheeks beet red as he stumbled a bit, standing ramrod straight. Can't you just bring me over to the studio like a normal human being? Ugh, loosening up, he had a hand to his face as he offered his own, and he felt the mad witch take it. Normie Schlammeyers. Besides, this was very important, Hatsum declared with wide arms, beaming brightly. I had to come and get you in person. Hatsum, did you go speeding through the hallway again? Power Loader yelled from inside the support studio. Wait, again. And did you blow up another door too? Seriously? Yep. Did it to get Parker. The yellow-eyed girl waved her arm as Peter turned, shaking his head to try and regain his composure. Keep this up, and I'm putting you on a leash. Eraserhead called me a moment ago to chew me out. The armored teacher pocketed his phone. But I see you brought the man of the hour. Man of the hour, Peter thought aloud. He sighed, looking down. Look, I appreciate you trying to celebrate for me winning the sports festival. I do, but celebrate. We're not here to party, you silly. Hatsum trotted inside as she tossed her hoverboots onto a pile of other gadgets and equipment. She turned, arms wide. We're close to doing it. We're close to saving her. Saving her. Peter's jaw dropped, and his heart skipped many beats. What? He asked in English. In the middle of your fights, Hatsum had an epiphany. Didn't even bother watching the rest of the festival. Power Loader explained. She went right to work on your suit, and when I came back from the stadium, I saw her making massive strides. He stepped aside, and on one of the holographic screens was a display. A display of his Spider-Man suit minus the mask, with the bright glowing blue core in the middle under the spider insignia. That's right, his drone. I was trying to get at the AI chip next to the reactor, Hatsum stated. All this time, we were trying to access the chip and trying to mold the microscopic connectors, which would have taken us months. All we had to do was use the big insignia that was attached, which has some kind of function of sorts given the wiring and CPUs within, and hook up to that. The ports there were much easier. Basically, return to sender. Power Loader defined. She tapped on the spider logo and it popped out. She did some experimenting and inserted it back in, finding out that it managed to connect to the chip. They were going to do it. Here and now, Peter asked rhetorically, a smile about to erupt on his face. Forget the second-year festival. He had to be right here. That's right, we're gonna connect not with the chip, but with this spider doohickey, and through that, gain access to the chip. And with that, Power Loader was cut off as Hatsum jumped in front of him. We can save Karen. Peter staggered, blinking before letting out short laughs as he fell back onto a chair. He shook his head. Shit. He laughed in English as he held his face in his hands. Oh, I can't believe I forgot about that after all this time. Holy God, I'm so dumb. Peter muttered in his native tongue as his shoulders sagged. I caught that. Don't swear in English, the teacher said in Japanese. But forgot what? That doohickey thing is a drone. Peter's hands traveled down his face as he spotted Hatsume standing there. Wait, it's a drone and you didn't tell us this, why? Power Loader asked, his tone indicating quirked eyebrows. I forgot, Peter admitted bashfully, blushing. All this time I was looking at it all through the wrong angle. He shook his head, beaming at the curvy pinkette before him. I owe you big time, May. She smiled. Wait, he blinked. Is this why you left the festival all of a sudden? Well, duh. But your inventions, the sponsors, all that meant so much to you. Yeah, but your friendship was more important, silly. Besides, they can just contact me lao. Peter almost felt like crying before he nearly lunged at the girl to catch her in a hug, clearly surprising her. He didn't care that she smelt like machine oil and had grease on her arms. The girl still had that wild smile and tilted her head as he hugged tighter. If you two are finished, I think we have some work to do. The teacher smirked as he walked over to his console. Peter let go of the girl, not even caring of the stains on his shirt. Let's go get her. Peter grinned ear to ear, his smile matching May's. The girl nodded vigorously. Let's go. The trio got to work, Peter's fatigue from yesterday fading with exuberance and urgency as he worked alongside May, the two of them standing over the Spider-Man suit. Like a surgeon, May used a laser cutter to deftly cut open an incision on the abdomen, and then the thorax of the insignia. Peter helped provide tools, his knowledge on Stark technology helping her get the right measurement and length for the laser cutter as to not penetrate the precious circuitry within. Okay, busy, Peter murmured. He and May close as they finished making a rectangular cutout in both units. The metal plate was peeled back with a suction pen courtesy of the American, and the glowing circuitry of the drone's interior parts was displayed. Alright, now to make the right components. Oh yes, May stated. The ports here are much bigger than the chip port. She grinned. This will be a cinch. Sensei, get me those copper and rubber pieces, please. Right. Hold your horses. The head of the support department walked over to the bench, handing over the materials as May applied a tweezer-sized tool to a box-like component. So this is the brain of our little drone, meaning that when it docks in your suit, it connects to the arc reactor and the AI core, May muttered. So if we can set up a link with the drone's CPU, we now have a bridge. Peter finished, shaking his head. I can't believe I didn't think of this. I always look at my babies via different angles. If something doesn't work, just flip it around to see it from a unique perspective. The pinkette stated. You always tend to find solutions when looking at something from a different angle. I'll keep that in mind. Peter smiled at her. First, we need to make sure that we don't make it too big or too small. It's got to be the perfect shape, size, and the right nodes needed to go inside. May used the tool and brought it to a cord that should carry the automation functions for the drone. All we need is for it to be unhooked, then we can add in our own port. Got it. May brought the tweezer to the cord, slowly tugging. Steady. She was slow, her golden target eyes unblinking as she stayed still. Peter could even see her irises zoom in. Then the cord was pulled, no damage inflicted as she set it gently to the side. Peter and May sighed, looking at each other. May still had that wide grin, while Peter laughed lightly. Now, for the port. They went over to the workbench, mixing the copper and rubber components before they proceeded to their consoles. Power Loader, who was observing from the side, laughed lightly. He kept an eye on the X-ray of the suit, seeing the glow of the arc reactor circulating within. Amazing. 1 whole year and this piece of technology had never needed to recharge. Time to create the file and server for her. He began to shed his armor, ready to help before he saw the two working together as they shouted out measurements. Okay, bring it in within a couple 1/1000ths, Peter stated. Has to be over a dozen 1/1000ths. Can't go in too deep, May replied, hands at work as she manipulated the tools, the robotic arms obeying her commands as they began to create a new cord filled with the right components needed to establish a connection. You sure? Positive. Can you get to work on making the USB adapter? Use the 3D printer and get the right stuff from the junk heap. May replied, I'll get this baby made in minutes. Peter got up from his bench, going over to the next table as he got to work on the holoscreen. Even if it was in Japanese, the American seemed to get the gist as he muttered words and commands to himself. He used the keyboard to find the recipe for making a USB adapter. Got it. Peter ran over to the shelf, returning with the necessary ingredients as he made measurements with a micrometer and ruler, getting the right dimensions as his hands flew like a piano maestro. He got the necessary metals, the right rubber and polymer components and got to work, letting the machine begin its surgical process in cutting down the metals to the right dimensions. Used giant 3-dimensional buffers to remove burrs, followed by laser cutter knives. Then oil and solvent was applied to cool the metal. Next, cutting and crafting the rubber cords, infusing polymer in order to bind it. Then the copper and wires were slowly added via gloves as Peter got up close and personal, adding them into the rubber and polymer one at a time. He connected them to the USB port, and he turned back towards May who was busy on her cord. Hey May, can I get the dimensions of the Peter was cut off as a paper airplane hit his head, making him wince as he looked down. He knelt down, picking up the paper and unfolding it. Numbers were written within. He looked back up, and May waved. You read my mind. He smiled, looking over the numbers, and he began to input the correct numbers and measurements, and the laser printer got to work, crafting the right port to connect to May's cord. The machine worked, and Peter saw the rubber and polymer fold in, enclosing around the wires and copper within. A laser welder came in per Peter's instructions as he guided it along with a steady hand, sealing it as the USB adapter was completed. Cooling fluid came in, followed by air blowers as Peter walked along the car-sized machine and came over to the end. And sliding out into a slot was his adapter. Done. He turned, seeing May rise up, lifting up her goggles. Just finished. Got the backup servers made. Had to delete some failing grade blueprints and oodles of stuff from my predecessor, but I don't think I'll need them. Power Loader got up from his desk, walking over as the two teens stood with their crafted gadgets in hand. Peter looked down, willing his heart to calm down despite the frenzied beating. We just connect these and it may work, May said, taking his hand as the two walked over to the bench where the suit waited. A computer was set up several feet away, connected to many robotic arms and an assembly line used for creating bigger pieces of gear. Peter took a deep breath, inputting the USB into the computer. He turned, seeing May hand him her crafted cord. Here, this is baby number 66. Peter took it from her gloved hands. Since Karen is your adopted baby, I want you to be the one to do it. Peter bit his lip, nodding. Okay. He connected his cord with May's in the right area. Calm down, you got this. It was just sticking a cord into something. He turned towards the suit. The first thing Mr. Stark had ever given him. Biting his lower lip, he brought the cord over to the suit, taking an eyeglass as he looked over the drone attached to the insignia. He got the right angle of the cord, bending over to slowly input it in. He was slow, but his hands shook. He was so close, so close. He felt a hand on his own, seeing May look down at him, even with her bosom close to his head. Izzy, just breathe. She spoke, no longer loud, but soft. It was nice. Breathe. Peter closed his eyes. Just breathe. He spoke in English, reopening his eyes as he got his eyeglass back up. He could hear Power Loader walking over, looming over them and seeing them with his eyes. He had removed his constructor shovel-like helmet. Peter spotted the CPU of the drone, his eyesight sharpening as he zoomed in on the tiny port. He brought the cord slowly over to it, and slowly pushed it in. Click. The entire drone's insides glowed blue, the suit with it as Peter could see the glow of the arc reactor inside. He heard a pinging sound on the computer. The entire support studio was dead silent as he walked over, clicking on the prompt to allow this device to have access. Confirmed. Peter then saw a big black pop-up screen, and within, a big blue with an arrow in the middle appeared for a moment, then a flat line. His heart stopped. Peter didn't know that the computer had a built-in mic and camera, his eyes glued onto the screen. "K. Karen," he asked lightly in English. "Are you there?" He paused, waiting. He could only hear the room's air conditioning, his breathing and his heartbeat. "Hello Peter, I'm here." The line moved, and the sound of Karen's fine English voice echoed throughout the studio. Peter's face lit up like fireworks, beaming as he yelled in laughter and glee. May and Power Loader backed off, jumping at the sudden noise. "It's me, Karen, it's me." He stared into the screen, hands on both sides of the monitor, feeling his eyes water and his heart soar. He saw motion, and noticed the camera zoom in. "Peter, I can see you," she responded, and Peter couldn't contain himself and hugged the monitor, shoulders shuddering as he finally let it all out. "Now I cannot." Peter didn't care, all that mattered was that she was back. She had reunited with him. "You're okay." "I'm sorry Karen. I'm so sorry." He sobbed as he kept his eyes closed, hugging the monitor. "Sorry for what? And you seem to be hugging my audio receptor and are in great distress," Karen responded, and on command, the lights within the studio flickered. As Peter wept, he heard the whirring of machinery, and he felt the mechanical arms of the nearby robotic arms turn over, and their clamps open, lightly enclosing around him. "I do not have the soft arms of a human, but I heard that hugs help relieve those in emotional discomfort." Peter shook his head, grinning ear to ear as he let out a laugh, before crying and yelling and sobbing as loud as possible. Finally, she was back. She was finally back with him. Behind him, May stood, jaw dropped alongside Power Loader. How is she? For that level of control she must have accessed the system within. A blink of an eye. I had firewalls installed and Power Loader paused, turning as he saw his pink-haired prodigy gazing at her brown-haired friend, gobsmacked. Wait, was she about to? "Hatsum, are you the girl?" Perked up, wiping her face with her arm. "Don't worry about me, I'm fine." May laughed, grinning as she looked up at her teacher. "I'm just happy we saved Parker's baby. His beautiful adoptive baby." "Yeah, we sure did," he sighed, putting a hand on her shoulder as Peter continued to cry, the robotic arms still embracing him. "Peter, what is the matter? Why are you crying?" Karen asked before she trailed off as Peter began to calm down, breathing hard and hoarse as she spoke in relative calm. "I'm detecting multiple new systems with manufacturers that don't appear in my database." "Peter, are we on another planet?" "I wouldn't call Japan another planet," Power Loader grumbled. "We're not that different from America." Peter looked up, blinking as he wiped away his tears, only for a robotic arm to appear close to his head, its clamp carrying a rag. He let out a light laugh, taking it and rubbing his face. "Another planet. About that," Peter muttered, licking his lips as he ran his answer through his head. "Karen, it's a long story. But, first, I want you to meet the ones who helped me break you out of the suit." He sat down on the chair, feeling exhausted, but overjoyed as he gestured over with his arm. "Karen, meet my friends." He spoke in Japanese. "Hatsum May, a peer of mine here at UA Academy, and the pro hero Power Loader, a teacher." Haya. May composed herself, waving. "It's so nice to meet you. I can't believe it. A talking and interactive baby." "Hello there." Power Loader waved, a wide grin on his face. "AI-san. Let's see." The computer that contained Karen word, a separate window appearing and going through millions of lines of code in the blink of an eye. "My records don't indicate you ever learning Japanese, Peter," Karen stated in a surprised tone. "And you look older as well." "Peter, do you mind elaborating on the situation?" Peter started to say something, only to stop himself. It didn't feel right, lying to Karen, but what else could he do? Waking up on another planet 100 years in the future with nothing but his suit. It was unbelievable, but Karen deserved to hear it. For now, he just needed to roll with the story that he'd always had. Maybe she'd. Peter flinched as his phone vibrated. He looked down, seeing a text from an unknown number. "I'll follow your lead." "Who's that?" May asked. "Jay, just you," Peter said, pocketing his phone. "Anyway, Karen, what's the last thing that you remember?" "Due to extreme circumstances, you removed your mask, and our primary form of communication as you attempted to enact a rescue mission to save the captured doctor." "Why, yeah, you could say that," Peter agreed. Riding a space donut into the upper atmosphere certainly could count as extreme circumstances. He'd panicked then. He doubted that he would ever not stop kicking himself for such a mistake. After that, my records indicate that the chassis of the Mark II spider suit was merged with the Project 17 codenamed Iron Spider. From there, I was only able to access your vitals. I've recorded several seismic events as well as damage calculations of a battle, but soon all my connections to the various servers had been shut down. Peter nodded. That was the story in a nutshell. Yeah, Karen, it's been almost a year since then, he said bluntly. If it was possible, Peter could swear that the flash across the monitor was a blink. For a boy that has ridden on the wing of a crashing plane fighting an arms dealer armed with alien weaponry, you have a talent for exceeding predictions, Peter. Hold up, Power Loader said. Alien weaponry, riding on the wing of a crashing. SHHHH. May quieted, literally putting her arm over the teacher's helmet. They're still going. Peter chuckled as well as he could. Ah, thanks, May. The mechanic flashed a smile and a thumbs up. Well, Karen, after the... His voice trailed off, remembering that planet. He frowned, biting his lip. Fight? We lost. Peter took a moment to pause, looking away as he couldn't bring himself to say it again. Not twice in a day. The monitor was silent for a moment. Is he really gone? Karen asked. That question, the question that had kept Peter from falling asleep when he first arrived. The question that he didn't let himself ask for months. He did answer it, eventually, and here, Peter felt a trickle of a tear run down his face. Yeah, he's gone. The entire room fell silent once again. Peter tried to take a breath, but it was shaky. He'd thought that he had come to terms with this a long time ago. Saying it to Karen, it just brought everything back. Peter, I'm so sorry that I left you alone with this. Peter shook his head, wiping the tears from his eyes. It wasn't all bad. I got some friends. They helped me out. Power Loader Sensei has been a big help in bringing you back, and May has done more than I ever thought she could. Awa, you're welcome, May said, flashing a smile. And I wasn't completely alone. Peter continued. I moved in with a family friend. She's been taking good care of me. She gave me the chance to get to UA. And it's been an adventure here. A fun one, right? May asked, stepping beside him. A really fun one, worth everything. Peter agreed. Then I'll gladly continue to help you along, Karen said. And if she was really here, Peter could imagine her smiling. Wouldn't have it any other way. All right. As much as I like the moment, we still have some work to do. Power Loader said, we've got a massive AI that needs a containment unit because I'm pretty sure she doesn't want to spend another day in that suit. I can display several transference options if you require them, Karen offered. For the moment, I can also transfer into Peter's smartphone, although I will need a direct connection to create a suitable home. May's eyes beam. Show me the options. I need them for my babies. Peter snorted at his friend's enthusiasm, and at Power Loader keeping the girl back from snapping up everything Karen had to offer. A second later, another text hit Peter's phone. We'll talk more later. And that was perfectly fine. As far as Peter was concerned, he had all the time in the world. He'd get to Momo's texts later. 30 minutes later, Power Loader completed creating a server for Karen to inhabit. To be fair, it was less that the teacher built a server and more following instructions from the AI. Afterwards, with a handy USB cord, Peter's smartphone had a new app on it with the Stark logo on it for him to contact Karen and to access her files and memory, which would be connected via cloud set up by Power Loader within UA. A word of advice, we can't keep Karen here forever, which is what I would usually say. But, given how complex she is combined with whatever technology your mentor had along with your gear, I feel it's best to have her stay within the parameters of UA. As firewalls for now. If villains or any shady tech support companies get any ideas, you would be putting yourself and your family through a lot of danger. Trust in me, and I'll keep Karen safe on this end. The words of Power Loader rang through Peter's mind as he walked through UA's halls, looking down at his phone. So, we are in an entirely new dimension of sorts, given the different timestamp and the lack of historical events that coincide with my prior records. Karen spoke into Peter's earpiece. He tapped it, thanking May for finding a functional one to use. It was small and fit like a glove in his ear. He connected it via Bluetooth connection created by the AI, one that was restricted to only his phone and to whatever device Karen so chose, so long as Peter gave her the go-ahead. Yeah, I wound up here after we lost, and I've been trying to get you out as best as I could, and I know you have, because I know you're not one to give up so easily. Karen reassured her partner as he exited the building, taking a deep breath and gazing up at the blue sky. There were some nice clouds going overhead. I tried everything, but I didn't have the tools. But you have to thank May. I wouldn't have gotten you out if not for her. Then I'll have to thank her again. The AI said smoothly. Peter took a deep breath and jumped high and fast, landing on the side of a building. He crawled up it fast and got to the rooftop of UA. Sighing, he laid down on the ground, his phone by his side as he gazed up at the clouds. You want to talk to your friend Yaoyorozu Momo? Karen inquired, making Peter perk up. Looking through my texts, huh? He asked wryly. Do you wish for me not to? No, it's fine. I may forget something and you can relay it back to me just in case. But Peter put his hands behind his head as he felt the breeze wash over him. He sighed. This was the life. On top of the tallest building on the tallest hill in Musutafu. Reminded him of back home when he can stargaze at the top of high-rises back in Queens. He always wanted to go to the top of Manhattan and stargaze too, but long distance and doing his duty around the neighborhood. I do need to talk to her. She sounded concerned too. And going by your group chat history, you two seem to be good friends. Peter smiled at her inquiry. Okay, permission to use group chat. But, yeah. He beamed, looking up into the clouds. Momo's like, the smartest girl I've ever known. And she's super gorgeous too. Like, the way she fills out her uniform and the way her hero outfit looks. He blushed, biting his lip. Sorry, I guess, never really had a chance to vent like this in. I kinda sound like a creep. You spoke similarity complimentary things to Liz back then. I never saw it as creepy at all, Peter. Only you being a teenage boy having a hormonal and intellectual attraction towards a young lady. Peter closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. Well, Momo makes Liz look average, no offense. And she and I are the class reps in our class. And he opened them again, sighing as he looked at the clouds overhead. He could hear fireworks go off in the distance. The second-year sports festival must have begun. She saved my life a while back. Her and Midori. Are you referring to Midoriya Izuku? Yeah, he's a nervous kid but he can mutter up a storm. And cry one too. Peter laughed, remembering the podium a little. But, he's a nice guy. Great one too when you get to know him. He never gives up, even when his body gets ruined from overloading his own quirk. It's a superpower. He smiled a bit. But, he's gotten it under control. Just had to give him the right tips and pointers. I know what a quirk is, Peter. Karen replied. When you brought me back online, I scanned over the many historical documentations I can access through millions of websites and their contents. Quirks, quirk law, hero and villain listings, movies in the making. I know a lot of subjects here now. Oh, sorry. He laughed a bit at himself. Don't be. If anything, I should be the one apologizing. The AI said, emergency functions once I lost my communication unit contained me to the CPU. But I could still monitor your vitals. I tried to send a message, but there was no function I could access. Only you have access to initiate certain commands for me to take action. Why is that? Peter inquired. Tony created an Ultron safeguard. Eyes such as myself couldn't act as independently as before thanks to that. Peter's jaw clamped shut. Ah yes, the Ultron offensive. Destroyed an entire nation the size of Rhode Island thanks to his special defense AI going rogue. Well, that makes sense. Nothing you could do about it, Karen. I should have been better, period. It looks like you have been, given my search of the internet. You're trending on most social media sites here in Japan. Even further considering how you're being connected to All Might. Peter sighed, hand going to his forehead. Yeah, forgot about that. I won the sports festival. Peter breathed in and out. Just gotta smile and wave, be like Mr. Stark. I'll be there to help, even if my experience handling media and paparazzi is limited. I will go through multiple ebooks and scan for anything relevant if you give me the green light. Peter, Karen suggested, and Peter laughed. It's fine. I mean, I'm sure Mr. Stark never got to be as confident as he is thanks to some book. I just gotta roll with the punches. Peter clasped his hands over his chest. Learn on the fly. That's all. Then I'll be there in your corner. Changing subjects, the AI mused. I have to say, Peter, the quirks of this world exceed most of my parameters, Karen said. Even in your own class, the abilities shown by your peers have me disregarding all but Avenger-level contingencies. Peter nodded. It made sense. Everyone here was so amazing, being born with powers unique to themselves. And it had all started with just a glowing baby in a hospital. But hey, strange things had started from less. Wait, hold up, what did she just say? Avenger-level contingencies. Tony's label for any power that could match one or multiple members of the Avengers. The AI explained. The only established counter to the Avengers is Project Veronica. You mean the Hulkbuster? Peter asked, remembering the many news clips of that giant suit going toe-to-toe with the Incredible Hulk. No, Karen said firmly, Project Veronica, created by Tony Stark and Bruce Banner to personally contain the Hulk if the Black Widow, real name Natasha Romanoff, and Thor were unavailable for combat. Yeah, it's called that, Peter said, but Hulkbuster is cooler. Media was all over it. That's not its name. It kinda is, Peter argued, quirking his eyebrow. It earned that nickname. This isn't up for debate. Then what have we been doing for the past half a minute and change now? Explaining why I'm right, can I continue? Karen asks, a little more forcefully than before. Peter nodded, but trying not to laugh was costing him his soul. Thankfully, Karen didn't know that, so she continued on. All Might has equaled the projected strength outputs for Thor, if not exceeded them. Frankly, his theoretical capabilities have been destroying every law of physics that I can reference. He may be even stronger than Thor going by the information I am acquiring. Peter couldn't argue against that. The idea that quirks were weird sank in pretty soon for him, so the idea of seeing All Might change the weather with a punch didn't hit quite as hard as it should. Now that he was thinking about it, the possibility made him question how a super strength quirk allowed him to do something like that. Even if it wasn't super strength, there was no combination of powers that explained the symbol of peace. That's quirks for you, Peter said, laying back down, staring once again up at the sky. They get weirder. Did you know there's a top 10 hero here in Japan who's just a living washing machine? Yes, how right, Superbrain AI. However, I think the term weird doesn't best describe the quirks of the top 10 or even your peers. The most apt description I would say is practical. Peter chuckled, yeah, they're all amazing. 743 group messages would agree with that statement to a degree. Speaking of friends, you have another message from Yaoyorozu Momo, with an unread message sent from yesterday. Would you like me to read it out for you? Peter sighed, kicking himself mentally. Crap, I forgot to get in touch with her. I got it, Peter said, sticking the phone to the back of his foot and flicking it over to his hands. A quick swipe opened the message, time to read it. Peter, are you doing okay? Sent yesterday. Would you like to talk at all? Sent just now. Oh geez, he really went and made her worried, didn't he? He quickly typed out a reply. Yeah, I'm good. Better than ever now. Got talking to an old friend. Old friend? Karen asked. I mean, I can't exactly say that you're an AI right away, Peter said, shrugging. Plus, if I just blurt out that you were trapped in my clothes for 10 months, things are only going to get weirder, says the boy who graffitied the walls of a storehouse with his webbing. The American boy scoffed, rolling his eyes. I was bored, Peter said in meek defense. He was saved as his phone vibrated again, another message displaying on the screen. Oh, good to hear. If you need anything, don't hesitate to call. Got it. Peter set his phone down, sighing as he stared back up at the sky. He never really was a stargazer, couldn't with all the light pollution in New York. The same was true here, but there was a nice similarity to the skylines at least. Big buildings, huge logos, and jumbo screens that made movie theaters look small. And Musutafu wasn't as bad some nights, being in the outer edge near the coast of the greater Tokyo area. Your group chat has updated, Karen said. Oh really? What's everyone talking about? Currently, discussions on possible internships are the main focus, but Midoriya Izuku seems to be having trouble contacting Ada Tenya. Peter frowned, casting his phone a confused glance. Really? What's wrong with Ida? Searching through the records, there was a news article about his brother. The hero Ingenium, named Ida Tensei, was attacked by the hero killer, a serial killer villain, and suffered critical injury. Peter shot up faster than most could blink. What? Ida was Ingenium's name, which meant Karen didn't even flinch, or rather, didn't stop. To clarify matters, he was working on his patrol route when he was ambushed by the so-called hero killer. He's stable for now, and the Ida family has requested that no questions be asked. Ironically, his firm released information that Ingenium was on the prowl for the hero killer after several heroes were found murdered or maimed in the Hasu ward, 35 miles away from here. Peter nodded, and lazily let himself fall on his back again. Damn, Peter didn't exactly have the closest relationship with Ada, but he couldn't say that his heart didn't go out to him. Losing a family member, whether it be a brother or an uncle, that was something that no one deserved to go through. At least Ingenium had survived. He hoped Ada's brother made it through. For now, it was getting late in the morning. Peter dragged himself up from the floor and felt a small tingle. He glanced to the side and there was a face in the floor, a smiling face with bright blue eyes. What? Peter just stared at the face. Good afternoon, the voice declared, showing a mature but youthful exuberance. The American's jaw dropped a little. Oh, gee, good afternoon. Peter responded slowly in Japanese. Can I help you? Well, I saw you climbing up the walls super fast, and I figured I could come see ya. Looked like you were deep in conversation with someone on your phone too. Peter paled. Was he being watched this whole time? He didn't even notice, so I didn't want to interrupt and went behind the wall. When I heard you stop talking, I poked my head on through. The face laughed a little. Hope I didn't startle you or anything. Why, you're fine. Peter grabbed his phone and pocketed it, grateful for Karen's silence. So, if I remember from the maps, topmost floors are the third years, right? If I distracted you with my climbing up here, I apologize. I guess I just wanted to get up here faster. He rubbed his arm a bit, feeling bashful. Man, he may get in some trouble now. Well, you're not wrong. The top floors is where the third years like myself have class, but most of us are prepping for the sports festival using the gyms and battle centers. He closed his eyes, having a wry grin. I gotta make up my math class, so I'm taking a quick test. Gotta make sure I pass and all that. Wouldn't want to disappoint the ones who helped me get this far, you know. He then opened his eyes, and Peter sensed something solid and firm in those bright blue orbs of his. Heard your speech the other day too, first year phenom. Great job delivering it, along with your performance. Guess all the talk about you is for real and not just hype. Peter felt proud knowing that his written speech struck a positive chord. But again with the name. He closed his eyes, rubbing the back of his head. Well, you're welcome. Just based it on some past experiences is all. And thanks for your encouragement. He bowed lightly. Be respectful. That was the Japanese way, after all. No problem, Parker. Now, my bathroom timer is just about up, so I need to head back to class. You should join your classmates at the second year sports festival when you can. He grinned, eyes of joyful determination shining through. The more experience you young tadpoles can get, the better the heroes you'll be, even if it is just from what you can see. With that said, see you around. I have a feeling we will be seeing each other again super soon too. Keep an eye on your emails. A hand came through and waved, and Peter waved back. The face plunged back into the wall and Peter finally exhaled. Wait, hang on, I never got his name. Peter got back up, running towards the shed that led down into the main building. He opened the stairwell door, but there was no one there. He's gone. Who was that, Peter? Karen asked in his earpiece. The brown-haired boy scratched his head. I heard a voice, so it couldn't have been your imagination. Some weird guy. Seems nice though. Peter looked over to the stadium and then down at his phone, seeing Momo's message. Should he talk to her? The fact that she sent it yesterday after the festival. He shook his head. He shouldn't trouble her. He'd already troubled All Might enough. For now, he needed to focus on other things. You're getting group chat messages asking for your attendance at the festival. Will you like to attend? Peter looked across the building, seeing the other tower of UA. And he saw his reflection. Karen was finally back. He hadn't fixed his iron spider suit yet, but he had his Spider-Man suit regardless, minus an important feature, and he needed to choose a place to do community service at for the 200 hours. He got out his phone, and he took the stairs down. There was work to be done. Gonna have to take a rain check on the festival sadly. Hey Karen, can you find the closest community centers? Sure thing, Peter. The American boy paused on the steps. Hey Karen. Yes, Peter. It's so good to have you back. He smiled as he patted his phone. The feeling is mutual, Peter. The American couldn't have been happier as he walked down those steps. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 12. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.